All right, Trails Collective world. This is Ian with the Trails Collective live episode. It is February 23rd, 2022. I am stoked for tonight's episode with special guests, Sawyer Magnett and Jeff Browning. I'm excited for the episode and to plug in. As I do in these episodes this year and shifting the format, so for those of you who are tuning into Trails Collective weekly rundown episodes the past year and a half or so, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for your support. The format was that I was getting pre-recorded clips from individuals and just weaving those in. I figured this year we'd try something a little bit different and go a little bit deeper in the one-on-one or dialogue with multiple people here. And maybe that would just be more interesting. So we are trying that. But with each episode, I will start out with just some updates, what's going on in the Northeast trail running world, and then weave in the guests. So this week and always to start, thank you all for being on here, for watching in real time now. This will also be converted to podcast form. Thanks to Ellie Pell for your support there. Wherever you get your podcast feeds, you can find the Trails Collective or TC Live post there. Thank you so much for sharing it in your own networks. Thank you for liking the channels. Thank you very much for all those who take that extra step in becoming Patreon supporters for the Trails Collective. As I mentioned last week and maybe prior, we've been able to support a handful of athletes out there, Northeast trail runners, to allow them to maybe get places and provide support that they may not get otherwise. Until some of them get those big ticket jumps, maybe. So all of those who are supporting the Trails Collective, you are making that happen. For the episode tonight, feel free to drop comments into the thread as we go. I think that you have to list the comments, if you have comments or questions to pose, on the Trails Collective Facebook live feed or the Trails Collective YouTube feed. I don't believe for some reason I'm still getting them through my personal page, if that's where you're viewing this. So by all means, do it at the personal page. But if you want to drop a comment or ask a question of our special guests later, go over to one of those two and drop a question. After the fact, if you're listening to it not live, you can also plug a question in there, and I will try to cue either Jeff or myself, and I can check in with Sawyer to get an answer for you and follow up. So feel free to drop a comment even if you don't catch this live. All right, so getting into it. Let's see, news and media. Something in the larger scope. Camille Herron, 12:41:11, 100 mile, broke her own record for the Jackpot Ultra Festival outside of Vegas. Lowered her own prior mark by just over a minute. So that is pretty phenomenal. Congrats, Camille. Otherwise, fairly quiet, at least on the Northeast front in the winter. Snow coming back in, at least in my range here. So it's quiet. All right, so Ultra Sign Up Hot List. They are events just to put on your radar. If you are hoping to get into some of these, they are about to close out. So I'm giving you the heads up now. If you're interested, check them out. Grayson Highlands 50 mile in Mouth of Wilson, Virginia, 97% full. Notchview Ultra 48 hour in Windsor, Mass, running July 9th, 96% full. Enchanted Forest 6 hour Ultra, April 23rd in Stratford, Connecticut, 95% full. The Blades 10 miler in Pocomoke, Maryland, March 13th, 92% full. No Man's 50K running March 5th in Triangle, Virginia is 92% full. And one of mine, the Breakneck Point Half, which is running Sunday, May 1st, is 92% full. And for those of you already in the know, the Breakneck Point Trail Marathon, which will run the day before, Saturday, April 30th, at least the men's field so far is shaping up to be probably one of the more competitive races that I've seen on the East Coast historically. There's one of two qualifiers for the US 42K team to represent the US at Worlds. One is a small race that you've probably not heard of, Pikes Peak out in Colorado, out there in the Rockies, mild race compared to Breakneck, and then Breakneck Point. So I am excited to be a qualifier, and we are getting a pretty fast and phenomenal field. I would love to build the women's field similarly. So if you know any fast women out there, let them know that top spot is still up for grabs to get on the U.S. team. So check that out. Registration's opening this Friday, February 25th. There's a new event put on by Ben Mazur. It's called the Ironstone 100K. It's a point-to-point running atop Tussey Mountaintop in PA. old growth forest, sandstone, and quartzite exposed Allegheny ridgeline. Looks rugged and beautiful. First year event. Ben has for sure put in his time volunteering for others' events, and this should be an equally as beautiful and rugged one. So check that out. Ironstone 100K opening this Friday. And a couple others coming up. The Cut 112 Reg is about to open. Runs in June from Southwick, Mass. It opens February 27th. And then a few opening March 1st. The Big Brad Ultra is running in October in Pownell, Maine. Moosaloo Ultra running in July in Goshen, Vermont. And Rattle Rock Ultra running July in Morgantown, West Virginia. And the Thunder Chicken Squatch running in August in Branchville, New Jersey. All those registrations are about to open on March 1st, so stay tuned for those. I don't know if any of them fill up immediately, so you probably got a little bit of lead time after they open. And then racing this weekend, the Willis River 20 and 50K Valley Trail Series in New Jersey, the Snow Devil Ultra Snowshoe Race in Vermont, and the Icy 8 hour in Virginia. So that's what's been shaken in the Northeast trail running world. Reg is about to open, and what is coming up. So from there, I am going to weave in our guest for the evening, who I am stoked to have, Sawyer Magnett. I'm pronouncing that right? Right? Magnett?
Yeah.
I didn't check with you.
Sawyer Magnett, yeah.
All right, good. Coming in from Lynchburg, Virginia, and Jeff Browning coming in. Are you in Flagstaff at the moment?
Yeah, Flagstaff.
Cool. And Sawyer and I caught up a little bit ahead of that. We didn't know whether Sawyer is originally from Prescott. I'll say that here in a little bit. But with you and Flag, kind of close proximity there. Mm-hmm. So thanks for having you both on to go a little bit deep this morning. We'll have Sawyer for this first 45 minutes or so to dig in, and then I'll try to run along with Jeff as much as he'll have me within reason after that. And so let me introduce a couple of those. And this one weaving in Sawyer, as we have done in the past, where it's a result of a Northeast trail race. This one coming off of Holiday Lake. So I'm going to announce this as a result from the weekend, and then we'll weave Sawyer in. So roughly 300 runners descended on Appomattox for the 25th running of Holiday Lake. While the 10K and 25K are newer to the event, the 50K plus, as Horton often likes to say with Horton Miles, goes deep with an inaugural running in 1998. The first woman in on the day, she was in 5th overall. Sawyer Magnett hammered out a 4:18 to lay down a new course record by a slim 25 seconds. And I have to mention that it took Jeff Browning 5 years and a 7th 50K finish at the age of 33 to run faster than you, Sawyer, in your 4:18. And that was with his 4:14. I believe it may have been at Hag Lake, if I remember looking at the result right, or something like that. So you're well ahead of old man Browning there. So well done there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thanks.
And Sawyer is 20 years young. She's a stud, currently based in Lynchburg, Virginia, while attending Liberty University. I think Horton told me you were focused on law. Is that what you're where you're headed? Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's not enough lawyers in the world. Well done there. Yeah, well, good.
Thanks.
And her roots are running in Prescott, Arizona, and where it should be noted, and I mentioned to Sawyer in the beginning, that somehow I am on the Prescott College alumni list, despite never actually attending that college. And Sawyer was 3rd female at Promised Land a year ago, last April. And that's where I first encountered her. As for all of those who are familiar with Promised Land, there's a last pretty big climb there, which is the Apple Orchard climb. And I think that I was probably walking at best at the base. and Sawyer came by looking fresh as a daisy, cruising right by, and probably put a good 10 minutes on me in that last or in those final miles. And then followed up with 5th at Mountain Masochist the end of last year. And so I'm going to keep running my mouth here, but I promise I'll shut up here soon. So that is Sawyer. And let me introduce Jeff Browning for those who may not be familiar. Jeff Browning, a.k.a. Bronco Billy, is a veteran, and I'm pulling this right from his website. So, Jeff, hopefully it's accurate information on your site, buddy.
It should be mostly accurate.
I could probably try to embellish it, but since you're a professional, I'll try to respect that, and I'll keep it to what you've written. Jeff is a veteran ultra runner and endurance coach. He has competed in some of the world's hardest and most competitive ultra mountain races over the past 2 decades, including Western States 100, Ultra Fjord in Patagonia, Chile, Europe's Ultra Trail du Mont Blanc, which some have maybe heard of at this point, and Ultra Trail Mount Fuji in Japan. He's also a 5-time finisher and 2018 champion at the Wild and Tough Hard Rock 100 in Southwest Colorado. He has finished over 150 ultra marathons in his career, racking up over 30 career ultra wins, most of those at the 100-mile distance, making him second in the world for the most 100-mile wins in history behind the legendary Karl Meltzer. So not a insignificant resume there. Hopefully Sawyer will eclipse you in, well, dude, you're old. She's got 30 years.
You got 30 years to catch up.
30 years, which is crazy that we're that old, right? That you're 30 years older than Sawyer here. But that's awesome. So it is great to have both of you on. For those who are attending live, feel free to drop comments. And so the format of what we're going to get into is going to just try to dig into Sawyer a bit here, where she's coming from, some of her experiences, weighing in on Holiday Lake this past weekend. And then we're going to get into somewhat of maybe like a coaching session of sorts. We'll have maybe Sawyer check in with Jeff, Jeff boasting as much as experience as you're going to find out there. So hopefully Sawyer can answer or ask a few questions there, and we'll just see where that goes. So with all that, I will stop running my mouth as much. Sawyer, it's great to have you. Tell me where you're coming from, where your roots were in Prescott, and what got you into this trail space.
Okay, so yeah, I'm from Prescott, Arizona, and growing up, I always did a lot of sports. I mainly did soccer, but I always loved running. So whenever I was done playing soccer, I got into running on my own for ultras, or I just ran a lot. I did track a little bit in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 9th grade, but I never really liked competing, really. I was just like too competitive, didn't enjoy like racing around the track, so it just wasn't something that I loved. I think I'm going to take my headphones out. Oh, okay. Can you hear me still?
Yep.
Okay. So anyway, so I grew up playing sports, did that. And then I always loved running, but I was never able to fully run as much as I wanted to because I always had to do soccer. And for soccer, you need to be quick, you need to be fast. So I could never do more than like 2 or 3 miles on my own. So anyway, when I was done with soccer, my senior year, I finally got to be able to run as much as I wanted. And that was right when quarantine broke out. So I had plenty of time. So I was just running a lot, and I was just planning on coming to Liberty. And then my mom, somehow she found Horton's class and was like, you have to do Horton's class. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do it. And so originally I was signed up for the fall semester, which is where you do the marathon. And so, but it didn't work out with my schedule. So then I was able to do it in the spring, which is when we did Promised Land. And so that whole semester, I was like, we're really going to run that far? Like, no way he's going to make all of these like kids in the class run 34 miles. Like, that's insane. But I was running a lot at this point. I was doing like 70 miles a week, or like 60 to 70 miles a week, which is like what I do now. But just the concept of running that far for that long with all of these like kids in the class who would never run was just crazy to me. But anyway, so eventually we kept going, and I started working up to it. We did the training runs, and I was like, okay, maybe I could do this. So then I did Promised Land, and I just loved it, and it was really fun. So anyway, that's what got me into it.
And so, and Jeff, feel free to always supersede me and jump in here too if you've got any thoughts there. But backing up to soccer, I've always felt like soccer is a pretty incredible sport for individuals growing up.
Yeah.
I'll put in Jeff's segment later, I'm going to get in, and Jeff, just so you know, it's coming. I probably have maybe like, 14 photos of you, and they're going to get into 10 concepts. And so it's going to spin off on concepts. But one of them I'll launch into would be your basketball photo for back in the day, which, for both of you starting in some sports like soccer, I thought was awesome in terms of developing coordination and youth. And it seems like maybe running is punishment, and maybe soccer players don't necessarily embrace running for running's self, but for those who play it early and stick with it, I think it's a pretty phenomenal base in terms of just physiological development.
Yeah.
And then the other thing.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I always loved the running aspect of it. I played center midfield, and so I was always like the fittest person on the team, and I just love that part of it. So I really liked that.
Well, that's good. So then, so
Yeah.
maybe that was a different take and a different kind of burning or imprinting for you. But the other
Mhm.
thing is, that's pretty awesome that Horton's like intro class builds you up basically to the
Yeah.
50K. And
Mhm.
for you to be out there doing like 70 miles a week, I mean, that's some pretty phenomenal base work miles.
Yeah.
And for some of those watching, I think Jeff's connection's a little shaky, so he may go in and out, just so you know. But we won't get too distracted by that at the moment. But so that was pretty phenomenal miles. So how did it then go? Like, so that was literally your first. Was that your first trail race, let alone ultra? Was Promised Land?
Yeah, well, I did a half marathon just at Liberty that was on the trails, but it was like really like low key. So that was like my first yeah, when I was lining up for Promised Land and he seated me like in the first because there were waves because of COVID. And so he's like, I'm seating you in the first wave. I was like, okay. And so looking around, you know how Promised Land is, like all of these like insane athletes and super fit runners. And I'm like, okay, guess we're gonna do this. But going into it, I didn't know what to expect. Like my goal was like I think it was like under 7. I don't know. I didn't know what to expect at all. So that
Yeah,
made
it's
it
tough
like
too now. There was if Jeff were still on here, I don't know whether you can still hear in the background, but somewhere along the line, I don't know how many, must have been earlier. I don't know, when you were probably 5 years old, Jeff made a comment to me or something like that. Where actually, what year were you born? You're born in 2002,
2001.
2001.
Yeah.
Must have been. I think you were probably 9. It was probably somewhere around 2009. Jeff was like, you gotta run 100 to be able to race 100 or something to that effect. And for you too, going in there, right? You don't know what to expect. And to your point, it just sounds crazy. Like people are going to run that far. I'm going to run that far. And I think that's the beauty about ultra is that you're out there doing something that doesn't really make sense, right? On any given day, you're going to be like, I can't go out and run 34 miles. Like I just ran 5 miles or 10 miles. I'm kind of tired. Like I'm done. So for you to just step out and that be your first time at it, that's pretty impressive.
Thank you.
So what'd you think coming out of that? How'd it go versus what you'd expected? And
It went well. Like I like 20 miles, I was expecting my body to just kind of like shut down. But honestly, like I felt good. It was a great day. Everything worked out. My eating was good, didn't have any problems. And just at the end, I felt good. And it helped with the downhill too. But just coming out of Apple Orchard, I knew that it was just going to be like 5 miles downhill. So that got me through the uphill. But also, I do a lot of hills. So I think that really helped me for the training for that race.
Yeah, and you're surrounded by a pretty phenomenal community and terrain to be able to get out there and race specificity, but you've got a lot around you.
Yeah, it helps. The trails are like right by campus, so every day I go up there before my classes, which is so nice.
And so at 70 miles, yeah, you've got the fitness. What I'm assuming in the class that you took, that you were I don't know, going over nutrition or strategies or stuff like that for racing. Is that part of that course?
Yeah, Horton, you know how he is. He would always talk a lot before we'd go out and run and just hearing all of his crazy stories. And then he'd throw in like some good advice that was just, but it's mainly like his crazy, funny stories and him like yelling at people. But it was fun. It was good.
And
So I did learn a lot from him.
And that's what Horton does in terms of crazy stories and yelling at people. And
and then giving advice. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And usually it's good advice, but advice that I guess he prides himself on giving advice that people, whether they want to hear it or not. It's Horton's comments that come out. So what was your going into Promised Land again? Because this was just a year ago. This was your first ultra, your first real. Well, you mentioned the one half marathon you did prior, but your first big trail race. What'd you do nutrition strategies?
So I had like 2 Cliff Bars and I was like, this should be good. I'll be fine. I don't know why I thought that was enough, but then at the aid stations, I just kept grabbing like little chewy granola bars, but I was nervous they had like grilled cheese and like a bunch of different food, but I was too nervous. I didn't know how my body would handle it. So I just stuck with granola bars and water, but at Holiday Lake, I had some Tailwind, and that was really good. So I'm probably gonna try to do that from now on.
Jeff, right off the bat, what do you think about the nutritional strategy, relying on a couple Cliff bars and maybe a granola bar?
Yeah, sorry I had to step off. We have a big snowstorm going on, so I'm having a little bit of Wi-Fi issues here. So if I'm a little choppy, sorry. Nutrition-wise, probably not ideal.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. What do you think for a 30 miler? So what do you
well, I can give you a quick tip. After 1 hour, have kind of a regimen of like at least half your calories coming from some kind of liquid nutrition, whether that's like something like Tailwind or Goo Roctane or Scratch or something like that. I think getting liquid calories in a race is far superior because you can absorb it really fast. It usually will have some electrolytes in it too, so that's going to help with absorption rate, getting it across the gut wall into bloodstream. Also, just looking at drink rate as half a liter to a liter an hour. Calories, ballpark 200 to 250 calories an hour. This is all after 1 hour. First hour you're good, but after 1 hour, especially after 2 hours. And then last piece, I always recommend 600 to 800 milligrams of sodium per liter you drink. So it's according to drink rate. So it will ebb and flow according to drink rate. So look at all of your liquid calories and solids. And I like to use also on top of liquid gels and blocks and gummy type stuff. And then anything that's really quick digestible at aid stations, stick to real food like fruit, potatoes, quick burning carbs. Any complex foods like bars that have protein and fat in them, I would kind of avoid because it's just going to slow down your GI. And so you won't be able to absorb stuff you are taking in after that. You just can't, you have so much blood going to heart, lungs, extremities, trying to cool surface that you just, there's not enough blood in the gut to really break things down very efficiently. So if you do have very complex foods, you need to really spread them out like every 3 to 5 hours. And then you won't have as much GI stress and energy levels will be really smooth. And for most people, that's kind of a intro recipe, I guess.
All right.
And what was your hydration in there? Sorry, you remember? Did you have and Jeff put it, because you'll often referenced in liters, but I don't necessarily think in liters. I'm sure a lot of people don't. Liters to ounces.
That's easy. Actually, it's probably easier to, liters is about 32 ounces, 33 ounces is a liter. So so most people are going to carry either 2 20-ounce bottles or 2 16-ounce bottles. 17 ounces is a half liter. So 16-ounce bottle is going to be about a half a liter. And most of the flasks that people carry in their packs, that's a half liter. So 500 milliliters. So 2 of those is a liter. So that's your drink rate. Somewhere between one of those or 2 of those half liters per hour. So.
And Sawyer, if I remember right, at least seeing the finish photo, I wouldn't have remembered from you passing because you were passing too quickly. I wouldn't have paid attention. But I think you had a single bottle, and it was like one of the Ultra Spire somewhat soft flasks. It was the hard soft combination. I forget what it's called. Which, I don't know. Maybe Jeff tested. It's one of his. I think you're still Ultra Spire, right? That's still one of your sponsors.
I am.
Yep. So that may have been based and developed along the contour of Jeff's back, his lumbar spine, is what you had in your hand, basically on that shape.
Actually, the bigger bottle is one of my sketches that I sent to Bryce way back. It was a pencil sketch. I think I faxed it to him.
That's funny. Fax.
So that'll take you back a little bit.
Sorry, have you ever seen a fax machine? Have you ever used a fax?
No, I don't know how they work. I always have to ask my mom, and I haven't done it yet. So yeah.
Casey, feel free to comment in on Sawyer's mom, and on the fax if you want to look it up on microfiche. We can look at that later.
Floppy disks and cassettes and 8 tracks.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All right. So yes, what was your hydration? So what did you think you were getting in? I mean, Promised Land, we had a fairly cool day, so I don't remember my body really asking for too much there. But did you have a target drink rate that you stuck with, or?
I didn't have, going into it, I didn't have a plan really. But I drank about one of those handheld bottles until every aid station. So
yeah.
every aid station I was like out and I would just fill it up.
Oh, well, that's good. I mean, so actually you were probably pretty close to
I
maintaining
tried
that target.
Yeah, I tried to make sure I drank a lot. So
Yep. And I'll weave in comments here. If either of you see a comment, the comment looks like it's cutting off your head there, Sawyer. So I apologize for cutting you in half. Jeff didn't mean to, I promise. But if there's any that you guys catch that you want to respond in on, absolutely feel free. But so that's good. So you naturally went in with that as a target, and you were hitting it. So that's awesome out of the gates that you're doing that as well. Cool. So that was Promised Land, and then you went through the summer and you got into Masochist. Was that like in November? That was your next up?
Yeah, and I actually ended up running 2.5 extra miles at that race. Somehow I got lost and I went to the top of Mount Pleasant on accident, realized that was the end of the trail, and then
I hear it's nice up there though. Not most people didn't get to see Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, it was, but I was not happy at the time when it said end of the trail.
I'm sure Jeff has gone off course longer than 2 miles at some point in his career.
Yeah, I've run a few extra miles here and there over the years. I did an extra 5 miles at Tarahuero 100 one year in the first hour or 2 hours of the race. So that was a nice little mind game.
And that's a race, if you're not familiar yet, Sawyer, you can have on your radar one out in New Zealand, which is this amazing destination race. So of any places to maybe go off course and just spend some extra time out there, I suppose New Zealand would be it. And Jeff, you still got the win there. So, maybe your time was a little off on the top 10 list or whatever, but well, it still worked out.
Yeah, I only added another hour to my time. So, it made me run faster, though. I mean,
you're fired up. And Sawyer, I imagine at Masochist, you were fairly. Yeah. What was your headspace, right? I mean, so for all those out there watching, that's also a part of trail and ultra. And being an RD, that's probably continually one of my biggest stresses. At some point somebody's going to go off. You don't know where it's going to happen, but it's going to happen, even if you think your course is impeccably marked. So in that moment, what was your headspace? How'd you do?
Yeah, I was mad at myself because that section, there were streamers for basically the whole race, but that section there weren't. And so I wasn't looking for streamers. So I kind of just went off. But looking back, when I came back to that section, I saw them just a little bit further down. So I was mad at myself for not looking, but then I was fine the rest of the race. Just afterwards, I was upset because I knew I could have had a faster time and done better.
And so I had to look at that too. And you finished fifth? Where'd you finish at Masochist? Finished fifth. So I didn't look at that though. So if you shaved off like an hour or so, where would you have been in the women's field?
I think I would have been I would have been behind Rachel. So I would have got second.
Yep.
For women's,
And so you can talk about that on your run tomorrow, or here you guys are going for a run?
We're going running, I'm excited,
Cool. Jeff, Rachel is also from Virginia, another just phenomenal runner. Amazing. She just lowered the course record at Hellgate this past year with a phenomenal run. So definitely an upcoming runner.
Yeah.
Cool.
So Masochist, and then so that brings us to Holiday Lake. How this past weekend go down? How did tell us a little bit about the event and the course, and dig us in a little bit to Holiday Lake.
It went really well. I didn't know what to expect. Well, I knew the course, so that really helped. But I didn't know how my body would do with just doing because the course is really flat. And usually I enjoy having hills and more downhills. But so I just didn't know what to expect. I didn't know if I could keep a fast pace. So going into it, I just wanted to do go under 5 hours, just see how it went. But all of a sudden
you did that fairly well.
Yeah. So I just started out going fast. I didn't want to start too slow, so I just kind of went out fast with the first group. And I just kept checking my watch, and I was surprised. It kept saying 7:30, 7:40. I was like, oh, this doesn't feel that fast. So my body felt really good. I had a lot of carbs the night before, and I think my taper really helped. So I felt really good. And
all right, let's pause there for a second. Yeah. Hold your train of thought. Let's dig in. Let's let Jeff weigh in. So we've got a couple things there. One, we've got the going out comfortably hard with the lead pack. Now, Jeff is
Yeah.
50 years old now. He's getting a little soft, and there's this popular theory, maybe spurred on by Nick Corey or somebody like that, that it's beneficial to just go out slow and kind of old manish, or maybe it's worked at Hard Rocks. That's what everybody would do.
Let me correct. It's not going out slow. It's going out at an appropriate pace for what your pace is going to be over the long haul. So if you have a target time, could you negative split? That's the concept. Just like you would in a 5K, 10K, marathon, half marathon, the traditional strategy for running a really well executed race is a slightly negative splitting the second half. And in tradition, or at least the last 20 years, since I've been in the sport, 22 years, there's been a lot of talk about, well, there's a lot of cumulative fatigue in ultras, and especially the longer the race. Once you get past the 50K distance, can you actually do that, or is there's too much cumulative fatigue and you slow down too much? So I'm kind of intrigued. I've always been under the assumption that you do slow down some. So I've always had, ever since I read a blog by Matt Carpenter back in the 2000s on slightly positive splitting, meaning you pace slow enough in the first half that you're not going to negative split, but you're going to become really close. I've always kind of raced that way in hundreds, trying to go out easier, relatively for the second half. So you're pushing harder in the second half. If you're looking at, like, say, rate of perceived exertion, your RPE is going to be harder than in the first half by quite a bit, but pace doesn't slow down that much. So you get close to negative splitting, but you don't. Maybe, depending on the distance, it's not that much, maybe less than 20 seconds a mile. But I'm intrigued by Nick's theory of trying to negative split hundreds and 50 milers and 100Ks and 50Ks, depending on the course, right? Some courses are front end loaded and back end loaded because of vert. So trail racing is a little wonky that way. So you have to kind of look, it's course specific, but I'm intrigued by the concept of holding back enough. You're still running fast in the first half, but holding back enough. So the idea is, let's say, for example, in a 100 miler, if you're only losing to the front pack, you're only losing 45 seconds a mile in the first 50 miles because you hold back and to try to negative split. In the second half, you have so much extra that you're gaining 1 to 3 minutes a mile on that lead pack. Meaning overall, you're not losing that much in the first half compared to the second half. Because if you look at splits, especially in something, some of the big races, the elite pack is always fading a lot in the second half, like compared to the first half. So that's kind of the concept behind it. I don't know. I mean, I'm intrigued by it, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's sound advice. I think it's something, at least when the hundreds, I guess it could apply to any distance. It's almost like if you're, particularly with these hilly races, if, for instance, if you're going to be walking it in the back half, you should probably be walking it in the front half, or something to that concept, where just aware of, the wheels are whatever going to come off and all the harder if you just don't, if you treat it any other way. Though, Jeff, I've seen, you're still flying on some of these finishes, and even from the get-go. And thinking back, I always remember the final few miles of the
we ran together.
Yeah, the final few miles coming in of one of my races, Sawyer's, one of still fairly early. I think it was 2009. So, Jeff was established at this point and for sure had some big wins under his belt. But it was just a smaller scene. I think this one that I put on Virgil Crest was, I think it was like the 22nd 100 in the country or something like that. When I put it on, it was still a smaller scene. We could still get people like Jeff Browning to come out and do a race like, I know, I'm half kidding. Come out and do a race like that. But you were flying down that last climb. I think it was like a 16:45 lap. I don't remember what it was, but it was a fast, like, last 5K where you were just cruising with a pretty stout course under your belt. So, you've managed to pull off still some pretty fast finishes. But then again, this isn't totally new. I think that you've always been pretty smart about your efforts. I try
to hold back and consciously hold back in the first half, especially the first third. I haven't always executed well on that on every race, but I would say 95% of the races I've done a pretty good job. I'm definitely even more intrigued by the negative splitting aspect. I've come close, but it definitely gives you more juice if you do try. I just tried it in Sean O'Brien 100K. Jesse Haynes and I tried to do that. We came close, but we didn't quite negative split. But it was fun to try, and we had a lot in the second half where we were kind of in that. Not only did you have mental, but you had physical there to because you've been social the first half. The first 50K, we were social and chatting like we would on a long run, and transitions on the climb. So we were hiking a little, running a little, hiking a little to keep our heart rate down so we could keep talking. And we're good friends, so the conversation was flowing, and so it kept us in that talk test aerobic zone, which you want to be in a 100K in the first half, and then we went to RPE 5, 6, even 7, probably, steady state tempo efforts in the second half, because we did a lot more running on the climbs the second half than we did in the first half.
And so for you, are you monitoring heart rate digitally or just perceived? Yeah,
perceived effort, RPE. Yeah. You got to find your flow in a long race. That heart rate strap gets old, and I hate having those things on. And and the optical's just not quite there yet, technology wise. Like it's sometimes accurate and sometimes not. So you can't really rely on it. So you have to do. I mean, I still like to coach by RPE, just because. I mean, heart rate data is important to look at as a coach, but I think overall it's important over time to wean yourself off the heart rate and learn to go by RPE and perceived effort.
So I did mean, but I also didn't mean to be rude and cut you off there, Sawyer. I just thought it'd be a fun interjection, because that would be a perfect segue to talk about just efforts, or if we're kind of merging the coaching aspect here, to talk about how you were just going out in that race and how it went. So early miles, you went out pretty hard, or you were going out comfortably hard. You were surprised at your pace.
Yeah, I went out. I was just feeling how my body felt, and it felt good. So I just was keeping up the pace, and I was pacing off a few people for like 8 miles. And then I think I just left them after that aid station. And I saw Horton a few times, and he was saying that I was on pace. And then I felt good, and I hit the halfway point, and I saw Horton, and he said I had to do that exact same pace if I wanted to beat the course record. And I was like, oh, okay, got it. So then we just went back around the other way around the lake, and just going out, I felt good until about like mile 20. And then my legs just got really tired. My right quad kind of like was feeling like a little strained, and just like my body was just getting tired. But I kept checking my watch, and I was like, okay, I'm on pace. I'm good. And then there was like this one, like at mile, like 10 miles left, there was like this little hill. But then all of a sudden Horton comes up in his white truck, and he's like telling me, like yelling at me, he's like, you can do this. I'm like, okay. And so anyway, he pumped me up, and then I made it to the last aid station with 8 miles to go. And so I looked down at my watch, and I was like, okay. At this point I was doing like 8-minute miles, and I was like, okay, I have about like, at this point I had like 66 minutes until I needed to get back, and I had like 8 miles to go. So I was like, okay, I can make that. And so I just kept going. And then the last 5 miles, though, there were like a few hills that were like straight up, kind of, just because my body was not like, most of the course is pretty flat. So those hills just hit me really hard at the end, and I just didn't think I was going to make it. But then all of a sudden I made it out to the downhill, which was like 0.6 left. And I was like, okay, I might be able to make it. I just kept checking my watch the whole time, and I just sprinted down the downhill. Luckily, it was like a paved road, so that helped a lot. And then just barely made it to the finish before the time.
And Brownie, you've not done a Horton race, right? I don't think that you have.
I've only done Grindstone. So, it's the only East Coast race of that he's sort of been involved in over the years. Yeah. But it's not. He's not the race director.
And so, speaking to Horton's courses, I mean, Horton's courses, I think are pretty great. I think there's a lot of intention to the design and the flow, and to what you're speaking of, usually have like a nice finish. And but did you know you knew the course record? You're looking at it in your watch. You knew it, like what you had to hit or whatever.
Yeah, I knew. So going into the race, I didn't think much of it because I don't know. I don't like to have a lot of expectations or like put pressure on myself. So I like wasn't really thinking about that until he said at the halfway point, okay, you need to get there by 4:18, and I said okay, and so then I knew what it was.
Uh-huh.
So,
And so that's pretty awesome. Yeah, nice work on that.
Yeah,
And
I have a
that's
question, Sawyer.
yeah.
Have you crunched your first half, second half splits of that race?
crunch, like looked at
Seeing
them.
what see what your splits were compared first half compared to the second half. Do you know exactly what they were?
I just like looked at them generally and like scrolled through Strava, but I think it was mainly like the uphill downhill was evened out, but I think they were all relatively around the same.
Yeah, that would be interesting data to look at just from
Yeah.
looking at your first, like usually with athletes, if they're looking to like improve performance, we look whenever they perform, we look at first half, second half splits, especially if the race is fairly similar in elevation profile in the first and second half. And just to see like, okay, like we can analyze for next performance, like what if, it's awesome that you got course record, right? But what if you would have like run, say, 10 seconds a mile slower the first half? Would you have had 30 seconds a mile or 20 seconds a mile faster in the second half, right? So, you know what I mean? Sometimes just a little less in the first half in ultras because they're so long gives you so much more in the second half. So I think it would be, as a coach, that'd be interesting data to look at just to see which, how close you were to negative splitting, for example.
Yeah, I should look at that. Yeah. I think, they are about the same. But yeah, I should test
Which
that
is
out.
a really well-paced race. And that speaks to why you performed really well too.
Thank you.
And it speaks, I think, to you so far, being so young in the sport, only a year or so in. I mean, your base is pretty good at what you're running. Like, I don't know, that's pretty solid base. I don't think I've known too many women that their bodies tolerate much more if they're in a healthy space in terms of a weekly volume around 70. Jeff, do you coach any women that are doing much more than that?
Not at that age.
Yeah.
No. I mean, they have a lot more experience in the sport if they're hitting 70 miles a week. A lot more years under their belt. So, yeah. I mean, but I find that 60 to 80 is a sweet spot for most people. Like, when you get up near 100, some people can handle it and some people can't, and some people might need 5 to 7 years of experience under their belt of consistent volume before they can handle it. So a lot of times, like I found over the years, I couldn't handle as much because I came from mountain biking. So it took a long time before I could handle, even 70 or 80 miles a week without some cross training in there. Right. I guess my body couldn't handle it until later. And after about 10 years, 7 to 10 years, then all of a sudden my mileage kind of, annual volume kind of plateaued. But I kept, every year was like 10% more volume, 10% more volume in annual mileage. And then all of a sudden I kind of plateaued, and I plateaued for probably, I don't know, a decade now. So I just found the sweet spot that, that works for me.
Yeah. What is your sweet spot?
Like 60 to 80 is kind of sweet spot for normal training. Low training volumes like 40 to 50 miles a week, but I cross train and I do a lot of strength and mobility. I'm 50. You got to do all the little stuff now. But I'd also say, I do peak at a little over 100 miles a week. Sometimes when I'm in like a big training block, say peaking for Western States or Hard Rock, and that would be 100-mile week with like 20,000 feet of climbing too.
Wow.
And of that, how much of that are you then training as you're racing? I mean, so it's not like it's all just flat, hard road miles. I mean, you're out there for a long time on some trails, which take longer, and elevation, and you're getting in hiking in there, and it's fairly mixed up.
Yeah, it could be 15 to 20 hours a week plus, depending on depending on how much vert, at what altitude. Living in Flagstaff, I'm at 7,000 feet now, so the training's at 7 to 12.6 most of the time, and sometimes down to 4 in Sedona or 1,000 feet in Phoenix if I get a trip down to Scottsdale or Phoenix or something, where I was this last weekend.
And Prescott sits around there as well, right? Around 7. What's
It's
Prescott?
like
I think it's around 5, right?
That's 5.
Yeah, where I live, but the average is like a mile high, so like 5,600. But
And that's
you
where
can
you were
get
born and raised?
what was that?
That's where you were born and raised as well?
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
was born in San Diego, but raised there, yeah.
Okay. And so physiologically, does that hold, Jeff, in terms of her physiological development? I mean, is there
Well,
something
she would
there?
have, I mean, living at a mile high is going to be definitely beneficial to, red blood cells and hematocrit levels and all that. She's going to, and then she developed there too. So she developed at altitude, right? So, all her teenage years. So, and doing sports. So that's definitely a benefit for trail running and mountain running. Even though now she's at a lower altitude, you will lose that adaptation because she doesn't live in Prescott anymore. But her body has a muscle memory. So if she ever moves back to altitude, it won't take very long. Or if she has to go to an altitude race, if she can come in early a little bit, her body will adapt a lot faster than, say, someone who just lives in Lynchburg and always has lived in Lynchburg.
And that's what I'm wondering, whether there's that blueprint at this point, developmentally speaking, whether her system's already wired to basically accept it, even if she's losing the blood plasma volume or whatever. I'm not using the right terms, but kind of the momentary gains.
Yeah, the beauty is there's a muscle memory there, and she's not that'll come back really quickly when she goes to altitude. And I don't know. I mean, we don't know exactly what, I don't know if there's ever, I'm not aware of any studies that have been done on, like, say, development phases,
No,
like
that's
growing
why
up at altitude and then moving to a lower altitude and training, whether there's some, auxiliary benefit to that. I don't know, but
that's what I'm curious about, whether you had heard anything, because I haven't. And maybe, I don't know, Ben Nephew, if you're still weighing in, maybe you've potentially looked into that, or if you're still listening, you can chime in, or anybody out there. But I don't know, maybe we need to use you as a study in some way, Sawyer, get you in some labs. So right now we're at 8:48. Sawyer, can we hang on to you for a little longer?
Yeah.
How are you on time? Yeah. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So what do you think? Community. You're definitely in a solid trail inspired community and culture. How's that? I mean, how was it at Holiday Lake? I mean, how's it feel to be in that community?
Great. It's great. I recognized a lot of faces, and then a lot of my friends that I met through the running class, they went and they continue to go to those races. So it's fun that we like kind of all do them together. So it's really fun. And then after the race, like on Monday, we all ran together and talked about the race, and it's just a lot of fun. So I like it.
Yeah. That's cool that it blends in the academic space as well as just the community space. I think that's pretty awesome. And for those around you, for instance, when you're talking about I think I don't know, like it seems like it's coming very natural to you, some of the most critical pieces of the equation, whether it be almost not taking it too seriously to a certain extent, having a pretty core development behind you, being amidst a good community, but then also feeling out your body pretty well, kind of knowing what it'll do, not to overrun it. Your instinctual or calculations for instance, fluids were pretty good, even if the Cliff bars were a little off, but it's a little bit of work there. But all those are pretty good. And then there's around you, like running with Rachel. I know Logan, Rachel may be coaching right now, but I know Logan's tuning in. But like Rachel's somebody who's very, very calculated. She knows it like down to what she should be running this mile in or this point in the race or whatever. Like she's got it there and it works. Yeah. So that's a pretty awesome thing.
And actually, I was able to learn a lot from her before Promised Land because we did a few group training runs together to get ready for Promised Land on the course. And the first day, the whole time, she was educating me so much. So that helped a lot. Like I learned a lot from her, and she brought me like a pack to try out. She's so nice. She's amazing. So it's amazing having her there.
I think that's what kind of, this whole community thing you're talking about, Ian. That's what attracted me to the sport in the first place. And in the early days when we were in Bend and those, when I first started running, I didn't know what I was doing. And it's always like, there's always a couple of, there's a couple of older dudes in town that mentored me. And, that was always like I think it's a huge piece of our sport. It kind of speaks to, I think one of the coolest aspects of our sport, when I first got in the sport, you could be like, oh, I'm like a solid middle of the packer, and I get done with the race, and you could be having a beer with like the winner.
Mm-hmm.
And what other sport can you do that in, right? Like you can be like with Scott Jurek having a beer afterwards, and like back in the day when Scott was winning stuff, that he was kind of like, him and Carl were big in the men's fields. They were the big winners back then, and Hal Kerner, and it was so laid back. That's what attracted me to the sport, is everybody just hung out and everybody's just stoked to be running trails in some cool, beautiful place, meeting up to camp out or, whatever. And it was just kind of a cool scene.
Mm-hmm.
And so you coming in, Sawyer, do you know, and because you've been a little bit more laid back about it and finding it really on your own here, or do you, any of these names like ring a bell, or is anybody out there that you've already kind of known about or who's inspired you, or not really? You're just kind of doing your own thing and meeting people as you go.
I recognize Scott Jurek. I've read a few books about him. Horton's told me about him, but otherwise just kind of on my own and just kind of going about it however. And a lot of my friends tell me about people, like they told me how amazing you were. So yeah, anyway. It was really good.
There was funny, I think I said, I think told the story, and I'll probably tell a couple more times. We'll have Chrissy Mail on here in a couple weeks, so maybe it'll come up as well. But one of the years after Western, I think, Jeff, one of the years I paced Sean out there, I believe.
Yeah. Just
hanging out post-race on a bench somewhere like off the track, like the following morning. I was just in my own space, just processing the night before, just chilling. And I had very much known Scott in the time when I was in Seattle with Chrissy and knowing the people around there, but I don't think I had ever really met. I don't think I had met Scott. At that point, he was, I think, moving off a bit into more of the sponsored runner and doing the PT thing, but not as much in the shop. And so we hadn't met. And so I'm sitting there on my own. Nobody else is around. Here comes Scott Jurek over, and I think he's wearing probably like this slinky like white tank top or something like that, and this like
and his jorts.
In the jorts. It was in his signature jorts or the jean shorts that he walks over, and they're like
shorty jorts.
Yeah, they were a short jean shorts and kind of frayed at the bottom, and he sits down next to me, and we kind of both just look at each other, and then I kind of look back out. I think we were around some track or something like that. I don't think it was the finished track because it was stripped of stuff. Maybe there's some accessory field or something like that. We both look back, and I just kind of look over at him again. Just like, Scott Jurek. And in there, I was kind of just, there's a part of me that's kind of introverted, and not necessarily like starstruck, but you're like, I don't know, what do you say? Like, this guy just hammered out at that year, probably like another record at Western States. He's like the X number. And it's just like he and I just in this moment, but like, I was like, I don't know what to say. And so I think I looked over at him. I got up and I just walked away because I was like, I don't know what to say right now. I'm just in this awkward space. And so to this day, I don't think I've ever had a conversation in person with Scott. But I don't know. So it goes. All right. So it's nice that you recognize his name, though, Sawyer. Of all the names out there, he is a wonderful individual who's done a lot of incredible things in the sport, and hopefully you'll keep meeting cool people as you come. So we've covered some of the pieces of your event, tied in some of the coaching pieces, not that you'd retain it all in the moment as we're in an interview form here. Jeff could always follow up with you and give you some of those metrics again or break it down. But was there anything that would be like fun to get into, or any questions that you may have had that we could dig into?
My question would be like, what would you recommend I do? Like any speed work wise, or just keep doing like what I'm doing, like a lot, like a strong base, or what would you recommend?
I would say number one's aerobic base for ultras, especially.
Yeah.
I mean, just keep running trails and, working on footwork and vert, you know, to get accustomed to downhill running and uphill running. It's such a unique technique driven sport when it comes to that kind of stuff with technical terrain and that kind of thing. So I think just generally like making sure you're getting some trail running in and doing your long runs on trail and that kind of thing. And, you know, 80% of your base should be an aerobic effort, you know, below your aerobic threshold. But I would say that speed work is definitely appropriate and phased at certain times. Sometimes volume and vert need to trump speed if it's a big vert race coming up with a lot of vertical. But speed is still appropriate in this sport, and I think a lot of ultra runners don't do it, and they should. And I do like steady state a lot. You know, RPE 5.6 is a huge one. You know, long intervals at RPE 5.6. Some of your strong, you know, throwing that into long runs, throwing it into strong finishes. Those kind of workouts, and then also some tempo work, and even some, you know, if you like the track or if you like interval work, going somewhere where, you know, especially if you can get in a group workout every once in a while. You don't have to do it every week, but, you know, throwing in some shorter intervals of 1 to 3 minute intervals where you're working on the more Vo2 Max intervals can be appropriate too. I always say if you know, use it or lose it. So you know, the older we get, the harder it is. You lose more and more the older you get. And that has been one of the things that I've always been motivated to do is some of the quality stuff. I do like intervals. I don't really go to a track, but I do like to do shorter intervals. Sometimes I throw it in with hills, sometimes not. Sometimes I do circuits where, you know, it has a little everything, flat, downhills, flat, uphill, you know, type of thing. Arthur Lydiard, a great coach from last century, coached a lot of Olympians. He was big on a hill circuit. And if you can imagine just putting a city block on a slope, it's a big square. So you'd always have an interval flat, an interval up, an interval flat, and an interval down. So you'd be the same concept. I just like to try to find it in runnable dirt or runnable gravel if possible. And so, you know, making sure that when you're doing that speed work, don't do it on super technical stuff because you put those two together. It's sometimes a recipe for disaster if you're a little fatigued in training, and you'll eat it and then you're injured and, you know, bruised knee or something. So, you know, just really mix it up and, you know, do tempo work, I like longer tempo intervals, you know, from 4 minutes to 10 minutes or 12. And then also some long steady state intervals, anywhere from 10 minutes to 20 or 30 minutes. And using those, you know, strategically. You really only need it once or twice a week, mixed into your training, and then give yourself a recovery week every once in a while, you know, depending on how you're feeling. And, you know,
what would that look
a lot of times conventional wisdom's 2 weeks on, 1 week off, or 3 weeks on, 1 week off, or 4 weeks on, 1 week off, depending on your time in the sport and your history and injury, you know, history and that kind of stuff.
What would a recovery week look like?
A lot of aerobic running, maybe 1 day with strides, you know, 10, 15 second strides, 5 to 10 minutes apart. So really long aerobic running in between those little strides after. And the other thing I would say is respect the warm up in training. So like keep it aerobic that first 15 to 20 minutes of every run, no matter what. Because what that's gonna do is oxygenate muscles and learn and teach your body to burn a higher rate of fat versus going straight to glycogen or straight to the glycolytic pathway. Like a lot of track and cross country runners do. They don't do that long of a warm up a lot of times. And so it's just teaching your body just to burn glycogen. And you want to teach your body to burn fat because you're running aerobic, and you want to really tap into that big engine of fat. Even a 7% body fat athlete has 40,000 onboard fat calories. So there's a ton of onboard fat to tap into. You just have to be able to do it, and you need to train aerobically to do that.
Wow, you know so much. That's amazing.
So let's take it a step further, but not to cut you off, because I want you to, whatever you're about to say, I want you to say. But in the moment, because he does know so much. So if we're going to put it in Sawyer's nutritional loading terms so far, if you're saying we have approximately 40,000 onboard calories now that we can draw on if we are so adapted to do so, how many Cliff Bars would it take to get to 40,000 calories?
That's a lot.
That's a lot of Cliff Bars.
I had a goo this weekend. I'm gonna do those more. I really liked that. I think I'm gonna use those. And wait, I'm gonna go back and watch this video, take notes later.
And that was you're right. That was part of Jeff's and still is, but I think early on, right? I mean, you were taking at least in Virgil in that year in 2009, you were doing a goo every 20 minutes for 16 hours. Is that what it took you or whatever? Dude, that's a lot of goos.
Yeah, I took a lot of gels back then. I don't take that many anymore. After going through the fat adaptation stuff, I do a lot less calories per hour now. More like 180 to 200 calories an hour. So mainly from liquid, liquid calories are half my calories an hour. Goo Roctane, still do goo. Goo Roctane, dripping about 125 calories an hour. And then, I'll have a little fruit at the tables and occasionally a gel strategically here and there.
Was there anything that do you remember what you were just about to say, Sawyer? Because I don't want to.
Oh, no, I was just saying.
Cool. Was there anything, so in your experience so far, you get to an aid station and you're looking at a table and you're like, wow, that X really looks good, but I don't know if I should eat that. Anything that you've craved so far? You're like, I don't know whether I'm supposed to be eating that. There
was like a PB&J the other day that looked good, but I heard later that the bread was stale, so I'm happy I didn't grab one. So yeah, that, and then the grilled cheese did look good because it was just hot because it was cold at the beginning of Promised Land kind of. So that did sound good, but I was too nervous to have it. I just wanted to stick with it. And I feel like that would have taken too long also to grab and eat while I was running. So
yeah, your effort and over that 50K. I mean, once you get something where you're getting longer and like Hellgate or whatever, you're out there for 12 hours, then maybe that grilled cheese, particularly overnight. Jeff can weigh in with a different thought, but that I think ends up becoming a bit more appropriate there. Cool. Yeah. Other things though that you may have would be fun to bounce off of Jeff at the moment while we've got him.
What's your Vo2 Max? I'm just curious.
I just got it tested over the weekend in Scottsdale. So, right. It's 71.
Oh, okay. Wow. Nice.
What have you, I'm sure you Sawyer?
I haven't gotten it. No, just what my watch says. And so I don't know if that's accurate, but it just says like 60. So I don't know if the watch.
It's probably higher than that.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think the watches are that accurate. I mean, you have to you basically need to do something to like full max to really get an accurate reading. And the watches are like ballpark based on some of the workouts you've done. So it's rough data.
And so with that testing, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, what watch do you use, Jeff?
Coros Vertex.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That's what I've heard.
I mean, the battery life's super, super long. So, when you're running 20 plus hours, or I'm doing Moab 240 this year, so that'll be 50 hours. So I need the watch to last. So it does.
Yeah. I was gonna ask, how do you mentally stay in a race that is that long?
Like,
what are you saying to yourself, like starting out like mile 10, you're like, okay, I still have 100 miles or however.
I don't say that. Don't even think about that. Don't even go there. Yeah, you just go to the next aid station and then the next aid station, and it's baby steps to the next aid station. So yeah, I mean, for me, I'm usually just checking in on, just like in a long run, you're kind of checking out. So you let your mind wander. You should be in aerobic zones in a long race. Yeah. So you should be able to talk to people. So sometimes I'm socializing if there's someone around me. Sometimes I'm just in my own head. Just like you would if you ever do a solo long run. I do a lot of solo training just because of schedule and when I do long runs or during midweek, not on weekends usually. So I'm not always running with people that often. So I do a lot of long training by myself. And so it just sets you up for those long races to be by yourself and in your own thoughts. And, you're just letting the miles fly by. I try to, connect with nature and really enjoy and appreciate where I am and take it, soak it all in, and, you know, high five a branch or something.
Yeah. Okay.
You've also in your hundreds, I think early on, and I think it's still the case, or your option is still to not have a pacer in the upper miles for the hundreds?
Yeah, every once in a while I've used one over the years. Like I kind of found in the latter half of like using them at Western States, they were more for like eyes in the back of your head. Just because racing for the top 10, it's easy for someone to sneak up on you and you lose a place. And I want to know someone's coming. So if someone's coming, I can surge and not let them pass me. So that's where I've seen, you know, it appropriate, or in like a 200 miler, for example, because, you know, the second night after losing a whole night of sleep, you go through the first night by yourself. The second night, it's nice to have someone for navigation because you're just so fatigued that you can't even remember if you've seen a flag. So, you know, if you see one 5 minutes later, you're like, have I seen a flag? You know, at least that's my experience. I mean, I still haven't done a 200. This is going to be my first year, but I paced at him. I paced Mike McKnight to his course record at Moab last year. And I coach him. So, and I've coached a lot of people to Triple Crown. So I kind of get what you have to go through. And I think that's a big one, is just having someone there to keep you on course. But in the hundreds, when I have had a pacer, so out of 4,200s, I've had a pacer maybe 5 times. So I find that I mentally check out when I have a pacer a little bit, meaning I'm letting them make some decisions, look for flags. It gives me someone to complain to, even if I don't verbally complain to them, you know, like say stuff like, you know, I'm hurting, I might sigh. Well, sigh is giving voice to the pain that you're feeling. And when I'm by myself, I don't sigh. So I just buck up because I'm in the middle of the night and I can't make stupid mistakes. I can't take a wrong turn. I got to pay attention to flags. I got to be focused. I got to be like, okay, when do I need to take another gel with caffeine? You know, like you're very like regimented in like your strategy when you're by yourself because you don't have anyone else to make those decisions for you. And I feel like humans are creatures of the path of least resistance. That's why we have recliners and remote controls and a remote starter when it's cold on your truck. You know, it's like we will take the path of least resistance if given the choice most of the time. So it becomes a mental battle if you have someone with you. And for me, and I think I understand. I'm not saying you shouldn't have pacers. I'm just saying my experience, I'm not as engaged. I am fully in the moment when I'm by myself. Because I mean, you're like out in the middle of the mountains. And I've had face-to-face with mountain lions in the middle of the night. I've had, you know, crazy skunk encounters and porcupines and, you know, by myself. And it's your butt on the line. So I think it just takes you to a higher level mentally.
And that's why I injected it here too, to your question, Sawyer, was because that's part of it in terms of what keeps you mentally engaged. I mean, Jeff does a lot of long races, and that's just part of what keeps him checked in. Like he can't tune now because he's out there.
Right.
He has to, right?
Yeah. Somebody said to ask about the cougars. So that was a mountain lion you came across?
Yeah, I've had 4 mountain lion encounters in hundreds.
Wow.
I've had a very, very close face-to-face. I had a pacer once. Actually, the first time I ever met Jesse Haynes, who's now a really good friend, we were at San Diego 100 in 2013, and he paced me the last 20 miles, and we came up about 3 miles from the finish. I was in the lead, and so we were the first ones through, and it was the middle of the night. It's like 11:30 at night, and we ran into something moved to our left in some grass off a big boulder. And we stopped and put our lights on it. And it was tall yellow grass. And this just cat head pops up out of the grass, green eyes glowing at us. And we were like, cougar, cougar, cougar. And it was like 20 meters away. So it was like, you know, pouncing distance. And so we just kept it blinded with our lights and walked sideways down the trail and backed away from it. And it followed us for like 40 yards. We lost sight of it. We were freaking out. But then, you know, we ended up, you know, backing away from it enough that we started running like 40 yards and then turning around and scanning for eyes and with our lights, and then, you know, running 40 yards and scanning for light. You know, we just kept running really fast and then turning around and running really fast and turning around and scanning with our lights. And I've run into another one at Hard Rock 2, actually a 2 together up on a big rock slab above me by myself. I did a lot of beating on my chest and making a lot of noise, you know, kind of ape man style. I got a little primal on them.
I was going to say, way to go primal on those. I was going to say, yeah.
Yeah, I yelled really loud and, you know, backed away, and it was like at mile probably 80. It was in like the Pole Creek area, and it's on the Continental Divide Trail, and it's downhill, and you're like 11 something thousand feet. And I just, once I got around a corner where they couldn't see me, I just took off and was running like tempo pace and on trail just as fast as I could go for like 30 minutes. And then it hit me. You know,
that'll leave a mark.
Running like tempo effort, and it's like adrenaline, and then all of a sudden it like, you know you're out of danger, and then all of a sudden it hits you like, oh my gosh, I just burned a lot of matches. Like,
wow,
that's good.
Yeah.
Cool. So how you still good for a back half here, Jeff? How you doing on?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. And so Sawyer, you are more than welcome to stay with us this whole episode. If you want to talk shop, listen to Jeff's stories. If you want to stay for a while and check out, that's okay. If you need to check out here, I can give you the segue. But again, you are more than welcome to stay with us. So either way is all good.
All right. I think I have to check out because we have groups for my community group. But thank you so much for having me. This has
totally.
been so fun.
Yeah. And look forward to.
Bye, Sawyer.
Bye. Thank you for all the advice. Don't worry, I won't eat Cliff Bars. I'm gonna
unless
on this.
Unless that's what your system calls for. If your system's I want that Cliff Bar.
Yeah, just cut them up into little squares if you're going to eat them, and eat one at a time. You know, don't eat a whole bar at once.
I spread them out usually. But yeah, okay.
Yeah. Cool. All right, well, Sawyer, I will connect with you more, and it was wonderful to have you. Congrats so far on the races, and we'll catch up with you next.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, totally. All right. So, Jeff, I got some photos here. A little.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, I think Meisner, I came up with some colorful ones. You're a bit more professional, sir. So I will, there's nothing too crazy here, but each one will have attacking a certain angle to get into something here. So let's see if I can remember how this works with sharing my screen on StreamYard here. I am going to go with, where are you? Let me see if I can open it here. Hang on. Why isn't that photo not coming up? Because darn it, I want this photo. It's going to be Jeff in the basketball years. Come on.
I sucked at basketball, man.
Well,
I hated that sport.
It must have done something good for you. There it is. So for viewers out there,
oh gosh,
we've got the third row down, second from the left. We have a phenomenal looking Jeff Browning right there, looking good, looking trim. Sponsored in your deck by Harold Supermarket, 101 North Main Street there. Sophomore guard, sophomore year, looking fit. Tell us a little bit about where you're coming from, man. Come from the Midwest farm boy, if I remember, developing your utilitarian mindset.
I was on the my coach, my football coach was the PE coach, and he required us, if we wanted to start on Friday nights for football, you had to take PE every semester during junior high and high school. And we had a full weight room. And we were on the Nebraska strength training program back the Huskers were doing, the football team was doing in the 80s. We were on the Nebraska strength training program from 8th grade through senior year of high school. So we were throwing weights around back then a lot, maxing out every 6 weeks, getting a new training plan. And doing upper body, lower body core work every week.
It didn't seem like it was really sinking in for you there. You were still a little scrawny in terms of the mass you're putting on.
You don't put on mass at that age. You're like going through puberty and like you're naturally burning like, I don't know, 7,000
calories.
Yeah. So, plus I was working on a farm too. So yeah, I mean, basketball was probably my least favorite sport at high school, but I played 4 sports a year. I played baseball, basketball, football, and track and field. And basketball was, what's that?
That's a big year.
Yeah. You just went from one sport into the next sport. We never got a break. So I was always doing that all the way through. I think sophomore year was the last year I played basketball. I took the winters off and started training for track after football because I really liked track. Was concentrating on distance running and the 800 meter. And so that was kind of my focus. So I use it as, I hated basketball. So I use it as an excuse to like not have to go out for basketball. My coach was not happy. It was a tradition in my small town to play every sport if you're an athlete. So I didn't do it. And I just ran during the winter and then, played football.
And so coming out of that secondary season, what was your 800 PR coming out of high school? That was your
202. 202 was my 800 meter PR. Yeah, I should have concentrated on in hindsight, being a coach and knowing myself, I should have been a 2-miler. But I didn't have our track coaches were football coaches. They were the football coaches. You went out for track if you wanted. That was spring training for football. It was the 80s in Missouri. Friday night lights were everything. So that was my focus, was football.
What do you think you could run the 800 in? Where would you max out right now?
No, it wouldn't be that fast. I have come close to running a sub 5 minute mile in my 40s. So I have tried for that on a track. I ran a 5:01.
Close, man, close.
Yeah, I didn't. It was in St. George and it was during a high school track practice, and I was with Ty Draney and a couple other Ultra Aspire athletes. We were in town, and it was back when Bryce's kids were in high school. We're in high school, and they had a track practice, and they were doing a mile time trial, and we all jumped in to run it with them.
Nice.
So, I just ran with the kids and was pushing them, and we went for like to kick the last lap, and I passed all the group I was with. I was like, "Come on, get on my heel," And I got across the track. I came across the finish line, and he was like, 5 flat, 5:01. I was like, 5:01, what? And I was like, I wish I would have known. I would have pushed harder.
Yeah.
So
that's good. And so growing up also farm, I imagine that develops a certain level of work ethic as well as problem solving and kind of practicality, which has also been a part of who you've been in the trail and ultra space.
Yeah. I mean, and heat training.
Training.
Bucking bales and Missouri.
Being okay with just doing work that just sucked.
Yeah. I mean, I was always the little guy. So they were like, I had to go get up in the hayloft.
So we brought filthy and
metal shed, second story, sun beating on it. It was like a sauna with wasps. So it was awesome. I always had to go up in the hayloft. But yeah, I mean, I worked really hard. I worked every Saturday. Even if I had a Friday night football game and I was beat up after a football game, I had to get up and do chores on Saturdays, Sunday mornings. I definitely worked on Saturdays and part-time on Sundays growing up. My dad didn't work hard on Sundays usually. So, he was a churchgoer, so we didn't, but I still had to get up and do chores before church. So, so that was kind of my upbringing, doing all that and, rode 3-wheelers and, I was pretty mean. I was pretty mean on wheelies, but yeah, you're right. Like problem solving is part of farming. farmers are naturally entrepreneurs and they're self-employed, and you have to have a work ethic or you don't get things done. And so you learn a good work ethic growing up on a farm and having to do, we had livestock and we had row crop and kind of a commercial farm, corn, soybeans, and wheat. And so we had about 1,000 acres we farmed, and then we had cattle and we had hogs. And so we had it was a lot of work.
And you got to be good with just tinkering with things, right? I mean, you got to come up with a fix like in the moment and creating things that just kind of work.
Yeah. Duct tape's a big one. Duct tapes and baling wire. It's in every toolbox.
Yep. All right. Let's go to photo 2.
Yeah. What do you got?
Yep. So let's go here. Let's go go Bronco Billy. Screw Your Shoe Clinic. Foot Zone Wednesday, 2015, winterize your running shoes. And going with this one, let me get back because I wanted to go intentional directions here with these. And so for this one, the selection of and quality of community has been something you've been, I think, pretty intentional with. You're roving in recent years to really find that place for the family to really feel at home. But Bend was a part of that. I mean, you chose Bend for certain reasons. And I think the community that was there and that you became a part of, and that you're, I think, to a certain extent, still searching for, has been a big part of who you are as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you can't replace 17 years in a place, like that it's just time. So, I mean, we still miss Bend's community sometimes. For sure. There's a discussion every once in a while when you get a little lonely, when you move to new places and you don't have that big social structure. And, and I also ran a graphic design business for 17 years there. So like I knew every business person in town and like a huge network, there's a web there. So, there's definitely some loneliness these days from moving around the last few years. And building community in other places. But there was a huge community there, and we saw it blossom too. Like it was not that scene when I was there and when I got into ultra marathons, but that town is where I got into ultras in 2001 and really kind of nurtured me as a runner. And then that community really grew, in the late 2000s. We had Max King and Stephanie Howe and, Ian Sharman. And, we had quite a crew. Sean Meisner was there. And during that time, and Teague at Foot Zone, like, he doesn't own Foot Zone anymore, but back then Teague was like, I always called him the mayor because he should be the mayor because he knew everyone. I mean, Teague really well. Yep. And he kind of mentored you. And he was just, he was, he really kind of brought the whole community together through his shop. I didn't really realize how unique of a shop that was until after I left. Like how tight that community was of runners, and like him tapped into the community. It shows you like it takes a specific kind of owner in a running store to create that vibe. Yeah. Because not every owner does that, or even knows how to, or is capable of doing it. But he was one of those Pied Pipers, and that was the heyday of Bend, Oregon, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that we may have arrived there around the same time, maybe you a little bit ahead of me, and we were in that initial boom when it went from whatever, like 30,000 to like 50,000 or whatever. And I think people finding it for a certain for very certain reasons in terms of what we were there for to find, right? And then it just kept growing, and then you saw these other pods. I mean, but you had Teague, you had McCubry doing the same thing around the same time up in Seattle, but there weren't that many that I'm aware of that were out there doing the same thing, at least that created the butterfly effects that it had in the trail and ultra space. And then you had the others. Then you had Hal go off and open his own. I came out here and opened my own, and things spun off from there, and people went. But that, I guess, everybody looking back in their I don't say glory days, right? Because we're still in really good, every day's a glory day. We're very lucky, and things are good for us for the most part. But like looking back, there's always this sentimental feel. And that was just one of those times and one of those places that had pretty big impacts in kind of where our sport is now to a certain extent.
Yeah, it did. It really did. And it was a cool scene during that boom. It was, I mean, we had a noon running group that went on for 15 years that I hardly ever missed a Wednesday noon run. You know, like it was a social, there was a group of, 5 to 15 of us that always showed up for that run, Teague being one of them. And we would just always like cruise out from the shop, run down through the old Mill District, up on the river trail, and cruise back. It was like a 7-mile run. I mean, and it was such a cool scene because, it was like a check-in every week with a bunch of people, and, we talked business, we talked politics, we talked, nutrition, everything, we running splits, races, like it was, it was just such a cool scene. And I definitely miss it sometimes, for sure.
Sure. And some of those things are just where we are, and I won't dwell on it, but so many ways that you can't go back, right? I mean,
you can't.
No, I mean, right, there's the world's just a different place. Like any of the things that you just mentioned, right? A political discussion, sure. I mean, politics is forever old, centuries old, and divisions or whatever. But like, it just feels a lot different than it did back then in terms of political discourse. Nutrition, knowledge of the space. You didn't have picky bars coming out of Bend, Oregon, after that, or like all these things that I don't even know when. I don't even know when was Goo. How old is Goo? Goo is probably, are they 90s?
It was pioneered in the 90s. I don't know when. I don't remember their exact founding date, but I do know that they were putting out product and testing product in the 90s. Like Hard Rock. I think their first Roctane gel was actually pioneered at Hard Rock 100.
So like looking back, like our nutrition at the time, that would have been a different discussion, different products, the shoes on our feet at that point, the dedicated apparel, like it's like, and there's no going back, right? This is all evolved, and there's so much more commercialization, but also so much more known. And it's, I don't know, it makes it seem like a very, I don't know what the word that I'm looking for is, not innocent time, I guess, to a certain extent. All right, so I have the next one, two back-to-back photos here under the same theme. Let's go. This one first.
Hey, Jeff, look at that. There's Fat Jeff.
There is, right. Right. So many angles that we could take on this, right? The change of your body type as you were getting into it. You hadn't quite dialed in your kind of fashion or what became kind of your brand statement, so to speak. But you're getting there. You're kind of around the periphery. It's just not totally dialed in yet, but still fairly.
I still had hair.
You still had hair. This is 2000. If I remember what I tagged, this was like 2008 or 2009. So some of the products that started coming along at this point with the handhelds that were definitely smoother at that point, but also on your Ultimate Direction, which was dialing some of their products on your belt. And then just on your shirt, the number of people that I'll have in this roots focus of the TC Live series is that Montreal Patagonia ultra running team. Like
that was the team, man.
That was the team. And also, like, not that there aren't teams and so many more brands and so many other things in the space, but talking about, like, you can't go back, and the innocence of that time and the ones to really start it, and kind of the anchor and it's that shirt, it's those colors, it's that brand right there.
Yeah, I mean, Montreal was a tiny little company then. That was before they got bought by Columbia. Patagonia was still really small, so they had teamed up to put together an ultra running team, and those are the early days, man. everyone was on the team back then, like
well, not everyone, but like, right. In terms of right. It was a larger community. And those,
it was a huge team.
It was a huge team. And
Yep.
to take a company that was able to sponsor it at that level. And I mean, I'm not, and maybe you can speak to it,
I just want to go back, and I'm going to correct you, because that was not 2008, 2009. That would have been 2003 or 4.
Okay.
Because Montreal, the first year, Montreal was bought by Columbia in 2005. So the beginning of 2005, I believe. So right around end of 2004, beginning of 2005, because 2006, 2005, 2006. So that was probably 2004.
That would make sense in terms of your body type, and you probably dropped it on your social media in 2008, which is where I picked it up and tagged it as 2008 in that photo. But yeah, that would make more sense. Yeah,
that was an old photo. So that was oh man, I was kind of a chunky monkey back then, man. I did like to lift weights. I mean, I was lifting weights at that time too. I'd come from a vegetarian diet. Had lost a bunch of muscle mass, had gone back to eating meat on more of a whole foods organic diet at the time, to put some context around it. I was working with a strength coach at the time because I was having a lot of like muscle imbalances in my legs from cycling, coming from a cycling background, and I kept having patella tendonitis a lot. And I was working with this strength training coach who diagnosed a quad to hamstring imbalance. And so he put me in the gym in the off seasons, and that would have been a spring race, because I'm pretty sure that was at Miwok 100K. So we could probably look an ultra sign up to see what year that was. But but I remember working with him in 04, 05, and 05, 06 off seasons. So it would have been right around there. So, and since it's Montreal, it's probably 04. That was probably 2004, 2005, or probably 05, spring of 05. And anyway, I was doing a lot of heavy lifting, so I'd put on some muscle mass, because I'd gotten really what I call skinny fat on a vegetarian diet. I just lost a lot of muscle mass, because I'd come from that Nebraska strength training program, lifting weights all through college. I was kind of a meathead in college. I mountain biked and lifted weights. And then I'd gotten really soft and lost a bunch of muscle mass and was getting injured, kept fighting injuries. And then when I went back to eating kind of a whole foods organic diet and back to like clean meats and grass-fed beef and that kind of stuff, I put muscle mass back on pretty quickly when I got in the gym in tandem. I was doing a lot of heavy lifting, so I put on some decent weight. I think I was like, I want to say I was 150 something back then, 155 probably. I weigh 142 now. But I still have the muscle mass. I just don't have the bulk or the gut.
And so maybe touch on a piece of that here in a bit as well. And I won't, because I gotta, I could talk on so many of these angles, but just as we were talking, and then we'll move on, because I'll move to the second photo in this sequence. But what's it like for you now, just also thinking back, and I wasn't a part of the Montreal Patagonia team. I was going 2 other directions, and whatever. But the feel of that team and the personas and the connection and the community, maybe it was just because it was such a smaller scene and time. But my sense looking from the outside is that you participating, being sponsored by Ultra, having other people on the Ultra team, the Hoka teams, whatever, it's not the same.
Well, I mean, the teams are tighter now, in my opinion.
Okay.
Like I have much more tighter connection with the Ultra team probably than I did with the Montreal Patagonia team. It was such a big team, and there are multiple tiers. There was like an elite team, a second level team, a third level team. So it was like an ABC type team. So yeah, we knew each other, but it was such a small community back then, like the numbers were such smaller. Back then, my first 100 was Western States in 2002, and it was a 50% chance to get in the lottery, so like that puts it in perspective. There just weren't the numbers we have today. So you just didn't have the numbers. So you saw the same people a lot. And a lot of people, we raced regionally back then, and then maybe went to one big 100 somewhere else, you know? So like I did almost every year I was doing at least 3 to 4 Oregon Ultra Series races. They had an Ultra Series back then with like 8 races. And if you competed in like 6 of the 8 or something, it was a point system. But we were always racing in the Pacific Northwest regionally, you know, either Oregon or Washington or Northern California constantly. So we saw each other all the time more. You know, now there's so many races. I mean, you know, back then there was like 3,300s or something in the US. Now there, I don't know, it's probably
a lot more than 33. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that just shows you how much the sport has blown up. So it's just different, you know, it's just not the same scene anymore. And it's way more like professional now too. I mean, let's look at the times. You know, we were talking about Scott Jurek earlier. Some of his times at Western States that he won with would barely be in the top 10. So in some years wouldn't even be in the top 10. You know, so it just is like, it's just a different sport. Way higher level, but we understand nutrition better now, like fueling for 100-milers, that people have pushed times. Just like when, you know, when they broke the 4-minute mile, then all of a sudden everyone started breaking the 4-minute mile, right? It's like there's a glass ceiling that you don't necessarily know can happen until someone does it. And then, you know, when Timmy went sub 15 at Western States, then all of a sudden we started seeing sub 15s and people running low 15s when no one had ever, you know, it took a long time for Jurek to break Mike Morton's 90. What was that? Like I think it was like 96, his record that stood till 2005 or whatever, when Scott broke it in 15:37 or whatever it was, you know? So, you know, and in 2019, I ran a 15:55 for 9th.
Right. Which is, all right. So this is, and it was fun looking at your photo there in the Montreal shirt, because it's the body type, the gear or whatever, but it's also it was the personality that you could see in your face. And yeah, you were mid-race and what was going on there, but that's then bouncing forward to now where the conversation has gone in terms of who you became, what the space became, reflected in that photo there, right? I mean, that's the leapfrog forward into the change in your body, right? Yeah. The brand, the post race, and just that, like, and I saved it. You can probably see it up on my top of my computer. I saved it as Excited Juiced Face 2016. Like
2016, like, third podium at Western States. That was
and so much stoke, right? In you, and that's who Jeff had become. That's the fire captured in that photo right there. The excitement, that's your zone or your space.
Yeah, that was a good year, man. That was the double year. So that's the year I got the double record with Western States Hard Rock double. That was my first year of fat adaptation, changing my diet and fine tuning it from that Whole Foods organic diet I talked about going to in 2004 to fast forward to end of 2015. I switched to kind of a high fat, low carb approach, and really started dialing in that kind of approach, and got lean and kept my muscle, and fat Jeff went away, and got rid of the fat suit. And yeah, my wife likes to say I had a big butt, and fat adaptation got rid of my big butt. So anyway, it was a good year. That was a fun year. It was my first time back at Western States, you know, since 2002. I'd taken a huge hiatus, 14 years away from that race as my first 100. And then I came back later with a ton of experience. I was really patient in that race, and just was a good year.
That was a good year for you. And I'll have another photo that'll reflect that here in a second, but it was cool to see that transformation in both you, where you had become, where you've remained, as well as how the space had shifted around you there. Let's go with this one. So this backs it up a couple of years. This is you into now You've become one of the best 100-mile runners in the country now for years. You are in the community, sponsored. Your sponsored deck had changed up a little bit, and this wicked cozy slipper of a shoe with the Patagonia Everlong.
Oh man, that was my like really like crash course. I'd been geeking out for years with Teague on footwear, and I'd been cutting shoes up, and I'd been part of the barefoot movement and dabbling in ultras and Vivo barefoot stuff and Vibram 5 fingers, and just weaned myself off of custom orthotics and by foot strengthening and barefoot running and playing around with that whole scene. With that shifted the whole footwear scene. Everything was like 10 to 12 millimeter drop back then. And then the barefoot movement like shifted a huge paradigm shift in how we approach shoes. Now you rarely see a 10 to 12 millimeter drop anymore in the space. I mean, there's a whole footwear wall behind you, man. And there was hardly anything, everything's like 4 to 8 now, mostly. So it really, really did change the industry. And I was fortunate enough to be in this kind of space when Patagonia was dabbling in going from casual footwear into some performance footwear. And they only dabbled for a few years before they just dropped the whole thing. And that's what segued me into Ultra in 2015. So that was right before, that was 2014. When I helped with the Everlong. But that was like my crash course of all those years of helping brand a running store as a graphic designer and talk footwear as a runner and geek out about footwear with Teague at Foot Zone and Bend. And that I had all this experience in the footwear industry and as from the retail side, because I worked a retail running store in college even when I was a mountain biker. It was a mountain bike running store. We were the specialty running store in my college town. So I'd been in around specialty running since 94. So I had a lot of experience in the industry, but just kind of casually, just because I liked it. And and I was a runner. And so that was a really nice like kind of crash course in footwear development. Because I was like the design, like help the designers and footwear production guys like come together with this from concept to final. And it really was fun. And that really helped me as an athlete and a tester. When I went to Ultra, their test size is my size. So I'm still very, very involved in footwear development and testing.
Is that a 10? I can't remember what Ultra is. 10.5, yeah. Yeah,
they're one of the few. They're the only ones that do that. Like everyone's always been 9.5 or 9 over the years, and and a men's average is like 10 or 10.5. So it made sense. The founders, I think, out of the founders of Ultra, they all wore a 10 or a 10.5, and 2 of them wore a 10.5. One wore a 10, so they did 10.5 as the test size. And I just luckily am a 10.5. So
yeah.
I get to get geeky stuff early when it's like not that fun to run in because it's not polished, but I get to be very involved in the early feedback loop of like fine tuning shoes,
which is good. Some of these that make it out of the gate that I see, I'm just like, what are you like? Did you really have this on people's feet, or did you really listen to their feedback? Like I could look at the picture and I could tell you why that won't work, let alone, put it on somebody's feet. And I remember thinking that was a really comfortable shoe, but then I also was thinking, but Wolverine, it came out of a Wolverine factory, and the quality control I remember was so-so of that.
Yeah,
model.
I mean, it was only like that was only for me a 2 or 3 year gig, because it takes a while to get to production, right? You're like 2 years out before you get a shoe on the market. So there was 2 years of development, or 18 months at least. And then a year out, and then they dropped footwear completely. So, but that was my like segue into Ultra, and I've been with Ultra family since 2015 now. And I mean, I love what they do. And, for me, like natural foot movement, it was a natural relationship. I fit right in, and it's been a good fit for me.
Yeah. And then I think to answer Kwana's question, you could answer it better than I could. I mean, I could stab at it, but you know more than I would in terms of why they decided to drop the shoes.
I don't know. There was it was a lease agreement somehow. I don't even remember. This is like, I'll paraphrase here. Don't quote me exactly, but they had a lease agreement with Wolverine Worldwide, and corporate cultures and all that.
Yeah.
One's in
Wolverine
Ohio,
and Patagonia
one's
is
in
not
Ventura, and one's in Michigan.
Uh-huh.
Like, I don't know. They just didn't mesh that well, and I could see the writing on the wall even back then. I could see that there was a disconnect, and it was just a matter of time. It was fun while it lasted, and I had a great time doing it. And I met some really cool people in Michigan during that time, and I still am in contact with sometimes. So it wasn't, you learn from everything, every experience in life, and so
And looking back, I think back on shoes like that, and like some of these, I don't know, behind me, like I've got like the original Adidas Marathon TR. The one that really said it. But I look back at like these other shoes over the years, and I've got some other classics back here that you forget how far shoes have come in terms of materials and how soft and flexible and clunky. When we were getting into it, the Montreal Hard Rock was this, the shoe. But thinking back, oh gosh, that thing was a brick.
It was like a light hiker.
It was a light hiker. And so, but I'm thinking now I still have this image in my head, and I didn't say, do you still have an Everlong in a box somewhere that's still got some life?
I don't think I even have one anymore. I totally, like, I would never run in that shoe, anymore. Like when I look at it now, I'm like, that I wouldn't, like, after being an ultra for so long, I've even tried to go to a drop again a couple of times just to try it out.
I don't remember. Was it 6 or 8 or what was the?
It was 4.
Oh, it was 4. Oh, that's right. Yeah. Because it was almost like a Kinvara Last at the time or something like that. Why don't you think you'd run in it now? I remember it being soft. I remember it being.
It didn't have enough protection or traction. I have to say, you run. It's kind of like you run out of time on the first round, like production wise, to get it to or design wise to get it to production. Right? You only have so many iterations, and we just didn't quite hit what I wanted. I still have it's funny. I have this, I'm a graphic designer, so I've done a really detailed Illustrator file of like of a shoe I wanted, like what I really wanted the Everlong to be. And I've gone back to that file, the PDF file, and revisited it once I was at years at Ultra. And I realized that like the temp or the current temp, the temp 3, or this new Outroad that's coming out in June, those two shoes are about as close to what I wanted back then, way back, that 8 years ago, that I really, really wanted in a shoe. Like I had exact stack height, if there was any rocker in it, what kind of tread pattern it looked like. I'd even designed the bottom of the shoe in Illustrator, what I wanted it to look like everything, overlays. It was a full 3D rendering in Illustrator. And I've gone back to that and I've been like, well, this is exactly what Ultra is producing for me. Thank you.
That was going to be my question. Why don't you give that to Ultra? But you're saying it's
they've already done it. That's what they went there naturally and exactly where I wanted. And, the founder, Golden Harper, and I are good friends. And he said once that like, I kind of see the temp, that 28 mil stack height kind of is at the ideal Ultra shoe, just enough cushion for the long haul, but you don't necessarily need a rock plate so you can still feel the ground, all that stuff. And that's what I wanted. I wanted like all of that. And it's exactly what they produced.
In the Temp 3, I won't tangent or get us stuck here too much, but then the Temp 4, man, I feel like it goes in the wrong direction. It gets kind of clunky again, and the materials are, I don't know, Temp 3's.
Well, I think you got to look at the our whole demographic we're speaking to in footwear. And one of the things that we got pretty strong feedback around in the Temp 2 and Temp 3 is, if you look at the 1.5, a lot of people like the 1.5, and it was a higher volume shoe. It was a little wider, and it fit a lot more feet than the Timp 2 and 3, because that last is a lot lower volume, narrower, it's tighter. So for me, someone who has a low volume foot, it fits me really well. But I'm a very, I have a pretty, compared to anyone else with a 10.5, I have a very low volume foot. So it fits me, but it doesn't fit everyone. And so that was our feedback. And so when they kind of shifted back, kind of a hybrid, in my opinion, it's kind of a hybrid between the two, the 1.5 and the 3. And I think it'll fit a lot more feet. And they wanted to take that shoe a little more overlays, a little more beefier than the Timp 3, because the outroad is going to be more in that lighter Timp 3 version.
And
the
I'm
Timp
excited
3
to
is a
feel
lot
that.
lighter shoe than, say, the 1.5.
Yeah.
Right. So if you remember the 1.5, and so
I do, because we did really well with the 1.5, and we got used to this is the foot we can put in the 1.5, and then to your point, when we got to the 2, we were like, it doesn't work for this foot anymore. Like, it's just not.
And the design team knew that, and they understood that. They got that feedback loop, and so the Timp 3 was just an iteration of the upper to lighten it up and fix some of the blowout issues that we had in the Timp 2. And so that it kind of fixed that, but it was still like there was still all this feedback in everyone's mind that, hey, we need to get back to fitting the feet that people really love, the 1.5, and that fit those feet. So this will fit those feet, in my opinion. I think it'll do better to fit those feet. And for me, I've already been testing the outroad a bunch. I raced Sean O'Brien in a prototype. I raced Hard Rock in a prototype last year. So I really like that shoe. And I tested the Mont Blanc, which just came out. So I think there's and they're all in that 20, upper 20 stack height range. So I think that, there now you have in that 28 stack or round 28, you have like 3 options now. You have a light race shoe with, mega grip on it. In the Mont Blanc, it's kind of a race trail race shoe, kind of with aggressive tread. Then you have more of the outroad, which is kind of more of like a hybrid shoe, which I still think that I ran a Hard Rock in it and it was amazing. I didn't have any problems. So that's a great shoe. And then you still have, the Timp, which has moved to a little more overlays and just a touch beefier than the Timp 3. And it should fit more feet.
Yeah, and I would love to keep digging, in this discussion, because I also have comments about some of the new models coming as well, but I don't want us to get stuck here either. But and you kind of already touched on it, but a comment from Grace: what are your summer favorite shoes right now?
Well, because of my low volume foot, I still love the Timp 3. I do like the new outroad a lot. It will be probably my go-to shoe with the Timp 4 coming out. I still like the Lone Peak. I still mix it in to my training sometimes just to have a different shoe. But my main shoe, if I go for a long run, I'm in the Timp 3. If I race 100, I'm in the Timp 3. Unless once I get the outroad enough, once the production's out and there's models to get, I can't get any more prototypes right now. So my 2 prototypes that I have are in the garage and they're pretty clapped out. I mean, they have a lot of miles on them. So, the midsole material is pretty compressed and pretty blown out. So I doubt I'll do too many more races in those. So I just ordered 3 more Timp 3s to come in to start rotating through, because I got some races coming up this spring. And then hopefully I can get an outroad soon, so I can race in that by summer. But I'll probably run Hard Rock in the outroad. So it should be out by then.
And that's one I do have booked, and I'm excited to get it.
It's a sweet shoe. I love it. I mean, that shoe fits well. It's light. It's got a wide platform. It's got a micro lugged outsole. It's not mega grip. I think it's Max Track. So the rubber. So which I think is a really good one for the West. Because
not so much for the East, man. I really don't like.
Well, you guys have a lot more wet, like slick conditions,
totally,
right?
And ultra.
And that's where the
Max Track does not work.
The mega grip is way better for those conditions because it's more like the Alps, right? So that's why mega grip is on every shoe in the Alps. If you see it's just slippery. But back here in the dry West, like, I don't know, the Mega Grip stuff is I think that softer, stickier rubber wears down a little faster on our dry, hard packed trails stuff. So
the next one I was going, well, I was going to bounce to this, but I might say let's move to something else, but I'll still bring it up anyway because I know it's such a probably amazing moment in your ultra running history and past, and just the feel of that moment.
So that was 19. Okay, you know that picture you gave me of the 2016 Western.
Yeah, so this was the other side of it. Yep.
That was 19 days later. Oh yeah, man. I was like stoked, but like really, you can see the fatigue in my face.
Yep.
I'm pretty tore down. So I mean, I really brought it that year off of Little Giant, because I had pushed hard up out of Cunningham and that crazy steep climb out of Cunningham, and got up over, you get up to almost 13,000 feet before you drop over Little Giant and then bomb down. And I just remember thinking at the top of that, I was like, okay, this is where you leave it all on the course for the record, because I knew at that point I was getting the record, and it was just how much I was going to lower it. And I brought it off that climb or off that descent. And then you have to traverse back to town. It's very rolly back to town. And I was rolling like, sub 8-minute miles on rolly terrain at 10,000 feet. I was pushing it hard, and I pushed hard all the way through town into like Kiss the Rock. So, yeah, you can see it on my face.
And so for those who don't necessarily know the record Jeff's talking about, it's the double record, right? For
Yes.
Western and Hard Rock. And you still have that? That still is what it is.
Yeah, it's combined of those two times. I ran like a 16:30 at Western States and a 25:42 at Hard Rock.
Yeah. So just
19 days apart.
What your body was able to, pull, right? Because it's not just there's a lot of individuals out there who are amazing, who can do back-to-back efforts and wicked long stuff, but to do those two at those efforts in those conditions that they run in, that's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, it was a good year.
It was a good year. All right, so there's another two sequence photo set here.
This is quite a trip down memory lane, Ian.
I know, which is kind of fun, right? I feel like there's so many things out there where you can get into nuts and bolts of nutrition, and it's fun to get into that. And maybe we'll get into it a little bit more here in a second. But like, I feel like when you're hanging around post race or hanging out with somebody around a fire, around a kitchen or whatever, right? It's like these stories. This is what I enjoy. All right, so let's share. I need some sort of audio, little drum tap to go into each one. That one.
Oh, what's this?
So this with your just
COVID strength.
A recent strength, but this is not. By the way, I really love what you've done to that garage. That's a pretty amazing space going on.
I missed that garage. That was my Bozeman garage, man. Insulated, heated, painted floor. The house I bought there the contractor had built that house, and he used the garage as an office space, like park his truck in one bay and office in the other. It was like a macked out space. It was such a sweet space. It was an oversized garage. It was sweet. I missed that garage.
No doubt. So this, I'll just go back to back. So this paired with, let me bring up the second photo here. Also going to be another, one of the ones from just this past weekend. How do I share it back to back? All right. So for those of you who aren't following Jeff's exploits, like some of us do catch, this would be the second one in there. So this one from this past week with you and the Vespa Labs working on, well, you could tell us more about it, but the theme though that I'm after here is, I feel like from the time that I knew you when we were first getting into the space in what have been like 2001 or something in there, like I feel like you were open to trying new things. You were open to using your body as a testing lab. You were, I feel like pretty quickly you were trying the 3 days, 3 runs a day, like workouts. And you were really just kind of exploring the space and using your body as a lab and being very, I don't know, like I always thought it was really cool, but here you are X number of years later and still treating your body as a lab and coming up with some kind of like cool stuff.
Yeah, I really like this geeking out on like what's possible. And I've always been a little, I like to question the consensus view. So and I'm not to say that some of the consensus view is not right. I'm just saying, at one time the consensus view was the Earth was flat, and everyone who said it was round was a heretic, and was like demonized and, so like, and slandered. So, I just kind of look at like this space as kind of this cool kind of, for me, I like to be a guinea pig, and I like the data, and I like geeking out on this stuff. And I've done every kind of nutritional approach almost over the years. I'm 50, so I've got a lot of, I've been a vegetarian. I've been a organic whole foods diet where I like soaked my legumes and soaked my rice, and we made kombucha before GT kombucha was even at Whole Foods. We were making jars of it up on top of our refrigerator, so we were like, my wife and I have always been aligned on this piece of like, let's try it. And then sometimes we drop it and say, well, that didn't work. And for vegetarianism, for me, that for both of us, it didn't work. We didn't thrive on it. And, I thrive on a high fat, low carb diet. I recover. I'm 50 years old. I coach a bunch of athletes in that, and they thrive on it. And I see all these N=1 experiments that the consensus is saying is stupid. The consensus is saying is, unsafe. And I'm like, well, wait, they're eating hunter-gatherer diet, like natural foods. They're eating fruit and potatoes and meat and grass-fed meat, right? And free-range eggs, wait, that's about as close to nature as you can get, the natural biological cycle of the planet, I'm sorry, but, getting rid of all our natural 70% of our natural grasslands to put grains on it is not natural.
Mm-hmm.
One monoculture and that's what I came from, farming one crop on millions of acres. I just don't, I just use my brain, and I use my logical thinking skills and my critical thinking skills, and I question and I try. And sometimes things pan out and sometimes they don't. And I'm finding a lot of things panning out right now on this approach for me and for the athletes I coach, especially older athletes. They see the recovery benefit, the lack of inflammation, the lack of bonking, no GI stress. There's all kinds of benefits to this approach for ultra athletes, if you're willing to try it. And we aren't keto, and I want to say that up front. We're not a ketogenic athlete, so don't try to put like some tag on me.
Mm-hmm.
I like the Tony Horton from P90X. He always says I'm a flexitarian, and that's what I am. I'm a flexitarian. If something else comes out and I figure out it's better, then I'm going to go there.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, this path seems really cool to me. And I'm seeing a lot of benefit to it and health benefits. And I'm not losing muscle mass, and I'm, you should be at 50. I should be getting skinnier and skinnier, and I'm not. And I'm still performing, and I feel good. And so I keep following the breadcrumbs.
Have you had some of your athletes where you've tried it and it hasn't really worked for their system?
I've had a few athletes that have given it a try, but maybe didn't quite have it's a lifestyle change. And some people aren't ready for it. They just mentally aren't ready to go there. They don't want to give up, some foods. And that's okay. I still coach. I still, more power to them. Like I'm not going to like judge you because of it. I'm just going to help you try to clean up your diet based on what you want to eat. So I'm going to help you make good choices based on, like whatever direction you want to go, I do feel like sometimes I don't want to sound like snooty about it, but I feel like my hands tied behind my back sometimes if you don't want to try some of this stuff, if you don't want to clean your diet up, because diet is such a huge piece of endurance training. And most people just say, man, calories in, calories out. No, not all calories are created equal. Nutrient dense foods, that come from real food, come out of the ground or out of a tree, or, we do have canines and we have eyes in the front of our head like a predator. We're supposed to eat meat. You can't get away from your genetic DNA. So I think we can do it in a very responsible manner. And I think, documentaries like Sacred Cow and the book Sacred Cow that Diana Rogers and Rob Wolf put out are really good first step towards educating people on that approach of regenerative ranching and that kind of approach, and understanding, we can be, even carbon negative. A grass-fed, grass-finished beef can be carbon negative, because of growing soil and the carbon sink that natural grasslands and that biological function represent. So
are you still tied in with the Patagonia community where they've had several focal points with, no, not so much. And where they're looking
I retired from the team at the end of 2020 to take a bigger role at Ultra. And I just more aligned with Ultra's kind of core beliefs and philosophies of performance. And I want to do performance and longevity and all that stuff that goes along with running and endurance. And Patagonia's kind of gone down this activism route, and I wasn't interested in going down that route. I'm very interested in, regenerative ranching and regenerative agriculture, but I didn't want that to be a sole focus. And I really, as a coach, and an athlete, I'm really interested in performance. And let's face it, I love shoes, and performance and helping with design shoes is pretty awesome.
And I'm going to go there in a second too, because that was going to be one of my photos. And this was something, I don't know how many years ago now. It's probably, I don't know, 5 years ago or something like that. I had tried to switch over to high fat just to explore, see what it was like. And I think I was in 6 or 7 months. I was less than 50 grams of carbs a day. And that's not to say that I was necessarily eating the right stuff. That's, but then my system just crashed, and I don't know whether it was related.
Well, you did it too long.
Well, yeah, maybe that was it. I went into this period of just adrenal fatigue or whatever it was, where I was just, man, my system was
I think one thing that anyone who's watching, who's playing around with like a low carb approach, low carb can be 20 grams to 200 grams a day. And for endurance athletes and ultra runners specifically, you need to be probably in more the 100 to 200 gram range than you do, but just stick to more of a paleo type of food list or primal blueprint type of food list versus that really low carb approach. Like 50 grams a day keto is not a sustainable diet for an endurance athlete. And we use it as a tool, meaning it's a tool in your toolbox. It's something to get you adapted and to restrict carbohydrates kind of in a strict phase for like 4 weeks, And then you bring those carbs back around effort and volume, so they're more strategic. And then you get all the pop back. You top off your glycogen. You don't get adrenal fatigue. Most people go too low too long, and they end up, like you had your experience. If someone tells me they've been doing it for 6 months or 7 months at 50 or 60 grams a day, I'm like, you better quit that.
Yeah, I can tell you that didn't work so well. Yeah.
Like, you have to look at it. It's a starvation. Like it was from our, think about our hunter gatherers days. I'm just saying, think about this logically. We ate seasonally, right? till about 100 years ago, we ate seasonally. So we couldn't get things out of season in the middle of winter. Like we're in the middle of winter right now. We would be on a high animal fat, high protein diet for 6 to 8 months of the year in most latitudes, right? Especially the US latitudes, we would have been mostly like in that zone for 6 to 8 months of the year. And then for another 4 to 5 months when things were ripen in season and we could store a few things and ferment a few things, we'd maybe last to early winter before we'd be out of them again. And we'd go through this low carb phase where we'd have low energy. And then our liver would start producing ketones for glucose, and we go into ketosis, and we'd shed all the fat we put on from during the ripe season, because we'd put on weight during ripe season. And then we'd shed that weight into the winter and get lean again into the summer. And so that was a cycle every year of going through that cycle of eating that way, right? If you think about it just logically, there's no other way to do it. If you take away our grocery stores and our convenience, that's the way we would eat, okay? You wouldn't survive. I'm sorry, but go try to grow a garden year round and get enough calories to survive through the winter. Probably not going to do it. You're going to have to go hunt. So you understanding that logically, then it makes sense. What we're doing, or way I coach it, and the way we're doing it in our circle, Zach Bitter, Nick Curry, me, Mike McKnight, Jason Schlarb is doing this too, kind of thing. Some are doing it more strict and more strategic than others. But basically all those runners that I'm talking about are kind of doing that. We're really doing it on instead of a macro level of seasonal, we're doing it on a micro level of weekly training. So we're looking at our training day. We're saying, okay, well, this is a higher carb. Like my carbs are going to be strategic around those bigger workouts. If I do strength and speed work, my carbs are probably going to be 150 grams that day. But if I'm like a rest day, I'm probably going to be like 60, 70 carbs, maybe 80, maybe 100, depending on the day and whether I feel like, what's around in the house, and also I err on the side of a little extra protein, especially at my age. Your protein synthesis slows down after age 35. You're on average losing about a pound of muscle mass a year after the age of 35. I'm 50. I should be losing a lot of muscle mass by now. So your protein synthesis slowing down, you have to offset that by a little extra protein intake. So I prioritize protein at meals. If I'm going to go back for seconds at a meal, it's usually protein. Yep. My extra calories are going to come from protein. And so I don't adhere to that kind of, if you went and read on ketogenic diet online and started doing a ketogenic diet and you're an ultra runner, know that those recommendations are written towards someone who's probably overweight and sedentary, or trying to lose weight, or have a metabolic issue. So, and they're trying to manage it. So if you're a healthy metabolism, you're a healthy person, and you're just out there working out every day or 5-6 days a week as an ultra runner, which most of us, people listening to this probably are ultra runners or trail runners. We are working out all the time. Our caloric needs are higher. Your protein needs are higher too. So you're not going to like convert a bunch of protein to fat. You're going to convert a bunch of protein to glycogen. If you have excess protein that you can't drop off convert to amino acids and, rebuild muscle, any excess gets converted to glucose through gluconeogenesis, and that tops off glycogen without raising your blood sugar. So there's a benefit to keeping stable blood sugar. And that's really what a paleo or a primal blueprint, or what do we call an ancestral diet or a nutrivore diet, so many terms out there. But whatever we call it, at the end of the day, we're just eating a nutrient-dense diet and trying to mirror in a technological, convenient age with grocery stores, trying to mimic an ancestral diet as much as possible. I like to say 80 to 90% of the time, right? 80-20, 90-10 rule. You're trying to do that, and that leaves some room for like going out with friends or going on a date with your wife, or, and loosening the reins a little bit.
What's your go-to? I just want to eat that right now. Food that is.
Well, there's a local place that's like Arizona Beef. It's a meat shop downtown in Flagstaff called Proper Meats, and it's a meat shop and a sandwich shop, and it's a really laid back atmosphere, and they do these killer grass-fed burgers, and they come standard with a brioche bun, but they do carry a local artisan sourdough from a local bakery, and I substitute with a sourdough bread. So that's my only time I have bread, is like this nice sourdough and it's always on. I usually do it on my long run day. So I come back from a long run and I take my wife to a happy hour. And then they do sliced potato chips. Like they do their own slicing of the potatoes and make their own potato chips. So you get potato chips. I get the burger with all really good quality beef, and I'm supporting grass-fed, grass-finished, so I'm carbon negative. And then and then we usually have a little bit of wine. So I have a little white wine. She has red, and that's my post long run. And that's when my glucose uptake's really good. After a long run, that's the time to do it. I'm timing it appropriately as well. So I'm not storing, I'm topping things off.
And then, so in addition, related, but transitioning slightly and I'm hoping to have an episode or two of this coming up, just because I've been really interested in it since I think I first read Noakes talk about it in Lore of Running, maybe, I don't know, 20 years ago or whatever, which ties in this photo here. There. So ties in, now going more globally, also retraining the body, in this case, retraining the mind, maybe getting the central governor to adapt, but switching things. So for those that I know, for a lot of these photos, for those who may be listening in podcast form later, you'll kind of maybe hopefully still enjoy the discussion, but you won't necessarily go, or you're not going to see the photo unless you go back and hopefully watch the YouTube video or leapfrog into it. This is a picture of just fairly current Jeff sitting there in the snow. Nice pair of shorts, maybe a pair of shoes on his feet there. Maybe that's the Superior or something on your foot there.
It's Superior, I think.
Superior. And then nice bald head at this point, nice shiny, but just sitting out there in the snow, not looking too happy, but in theory, meditative.
I was focusing, man. It was snowing, and it was like, I'm trying to remember, it might have been like around 0 out. This is in Bozeman, on my back patio, right out the back kitchen door. And yeah, my wife is whispering to me it was 0. And because she took the photo. I was messing around with Wim Hof breathing techniques and cold showers and all that. And I had just read his book. And so I had been really geeking out on it and testing it on myself. And I was getting out in sitting for 2 minutes at a time. And then I'd come back in and do breathing and warm back up and then go back out. So I was doing sets of going out. I was using the opportunity. It was a really cold snap, and we were having a storm, and so I was just I was like, wow, that's natural. Like, I don't have to go do a cold shower. I can just go out on my back patio right now. So anyway, I was kind of playing around with that, and I played around with cold, over the years, I've always dunked in creeks, cold, snow melt creeks, if I get the opportunity, or jump in Ice Lake, Island Lake on the Hard Rock course when I've been training there. And if anybody's ever been to Ice Lake, there's a reason they call it Ice Lake. It'll take your breath away. You better hold your breath when you jump in and dive in, because otherwise you're going to come out going, so yeah, I mean, I think, there's some benefit to, cold, I would recommend people just kind of look into that kind of stuff, autophagy, and it cleans up some mitochondria and, messed up, broken stuff and cellular stuff. So I'm not going to give you I don't really know off the top of my head all the benefits to it. I think the Wim Hof book, Wim Hof Method, was a really interesting read from that perspective. I played around with his breathing techniques. I still do, even running. I play with his breathing techniques. I especially use his breathing techniques in cold plunges, because it controls the mind. So I think I think this piece is fascinating to me.
And I agree. And I'm hoping. I think he said he'd be up for it, but one of the episodes in the next couple of months, hopefully I'll have Joe Yuhan on. It's kind of a follow-up, I think, on Trail Runner Nation. They did a 2-part on Central Governor. But going beyond that, beyond just presenting it, is like, what do you do with that? Like, so what are the ways that people then can tweak or trick or whatever in terms of the Central Governor to maybe get whether it be temporary or long-term results? And I reached out to Noakes as well. I haven't gotten a response. I know his world is chaos past couple of years. And I don't know whether I had the accurate contact information still, but I'm still really intrigued by this concept.
Of Central Governor?
Yeah, as well as just kind of retraining the system, like anything, in terms of how adaptable it is, I guess.
Well, I mean, I think it's definitely trainable. I mean, I feel like I've trained it over the years. To be able to go to a place where, one, you either have to control yourself. Like, I think one of the things, the benefit of cold adaptation stuff is you really have to control the mind. And breathing and mind go together, whether it's holding breath or breathing both, or a combination of the two. In Bozeman, we had this really cool hot springs where they had super cold water pools next to super hot. And so you could go between the two. And so it was really fun for me and my kids to like see who could control their mind and who couldn't, right? Like who could get in and be able to go and find your center, and some people couldn't, right? Like my daughter's really good at it. She can get in and just like find calm her head and just really do it. And so like I think it's really interesting to see who can control their mind and who can't, and tap into that piece. I think it's a really interesting part of the mind, I don't know if anybody out there has read the book Endure, but that's another good one on, endurance training and the mind. You really have to find a place you can go to and calm yourself and keep yourself under control and not freak out, or be able to tap into something that makes you push that you didn't think you had. There's a lot of glass ceilings to break in this sport,
which is just so crux. And there's any number of things that have come up just as we've been talking tonight. So I'm having a great time this past year as an assistant coach up with Ithaca College for cross country and the track program for distance and the women's team. And just at that point, there's so many of the women that like I have this sense of what they're capable of. And it's like this with everything, right, in life, but like they haven't embraced it, or they haven't owned it. And you can't tap it like until you can find that mental space, until you can embrace it, and you can't find it. And so you're out there, and so many of them, they're just not hitting this maybe time, or it's not even about the time, right? It's about, I've seen some of them in their flow state when they're just flowing, when they're just charging, when you can see them dialed in and connected mid or late in a race. And then you see the races where you can just see it in the face, like they haven't owned it. They're running more in fear. They're just in this awkward space. And it's just finding it and flipping that switch in some way. And you can train it, but it's tough to get it out of others.
I think an interesting part of it is you really have to have really good, positive internal speak. And not coming from a place, you have to avoid coming from a place of fear. And fear creates a whole cascade of emotions and thoughts that create anxiety and ups your cortisol levels. And, there's all these, and heart rate and blood pressure and everything else, right? And then when we can be calm and like dwell on really good things and have good internal speak, like when you're hurting, like in a race, or like I just had to do 2 Vo2 Max tests in 2 days in a row.
Talk about
suck. Mask on that's restricting your airflow, right? That's slightly pinching your nose because the sweat's sliding down.
And that was even a nice mask that you were using.
and you got this tube in your line of sight in the center that like messes with your balance on the treadmill, you know, and you're supposed to push as hard as you can till max. And so like that, there's a place where you have to go in your head. One is breathing, calming the breathing, like good in through the nose and nose and mouth, but primarily nose, and out through the mouth, and quick out through the mouth. So long intake, slow outtake, or quick outtake. And I think that controlling breath can really help, but also that helps control the mind. But then you can also that internal speak. Like for me, even on the treadmill, I would be telling myself things like, you can do this, you know, you can push this, you got this, you know. The opposite side of that would be like, oh, this hurts, this sucks, right? You should not go there. You can't go there, or you're gonna quit. You're gonna quit early, or you're gonna back off on the effort, right?
Yep.
You know, cross country or a track meet's a perfect example, right? That you got to go hard at the end, and you got to go really hard the last, 10% of the race. And you have to prepare the mind to go there before the body. So like visualization before the race, into positive internal speak. I would recommend anyone who's in ultra running to read the book Endure, because it just puts in this, taking your neural pathways and like knowing how they work. Because whenever you have bad thoughts, you send actual proteins to build a tree-like structure in your brain. You send there to build that thought pattern, and the more you do it, the more that becomes an automated pathway that you will go to in most situations, especially stressful situations. So those people, everyone has the person in their office who's the like always has something, like every situation is a bad spin to it. Like, oh man, I can't believe that's happening. Oh, that client. Oh, that person. Oh, this. Oh, that. Right. Or there's the people who are eternally like always happy. Like, oh, they always put a good spin on everything, even if it's bad news. Right. Like those are two different automated pathways that they've developed as an automated response because they've sent actual proteins to a tree-like structure in their brain.
There's another variation for your test, and what you're about to do is we need to get to those two personality types, and we need to put them on the treadmill for that VO2 test. And for you, so for your results there, did you hit peak and you started to decline when you pulled, or what was at your, and this was a jump for you, right? At least between the two tests, between the 67 and the 71, which is great scores. You feel like that's where it was? I mean, did you max?
I definitely maxed. Like, I think there's a fueling thing there that definitely affects how hard you can do your top end, right? Because we were testing fat oxidation rates and crossover point. So mainly, and Vo2 Max was kind of a final piece that wasn't the main like thing we're looking at. We're mainly looking at fat oxidation rates, what percent of your Vo2 Max can you push, and where's your crossover in regards to your Vo2 Max? Like what percent of your Vo2 Max? And what we see is, fat adaptation pushes your crossover point more higher towards your Vo2 Max. So it's a way higher percentage of your Vo2 Max than a traditional kind of high carb athlete. And so, but if you're down, you can down regulate that too much by being too low carb, which means you won't even reach a crossover point because you can't hit your top end. Which, I saw on my fasted day, I never hit a crossover point. I tapped out, was maxed out, and I never hit a crossover point. I was just burning fat at a really high rate. But the next day, I was able to push a little crossover point. So, but it was like at a high rate. So like I don't know where I'm going with this. I'm probably getting off on a tangent, but I think there's both physiology and mind. They go together, and there's a combo there. Diet matters, nutrition matters, what you had, how you fuel, but also your mindset into the race, during the race. All of it matters.
Yeah, and for me, in my experience, I'm one of those that I don't know what it is. I don't know whether I've got that negative defeatist. I've always felt that I'm weak between the ears. That's definitely it's just definitely there, and I don't know whether it's defeatist or I don't know what it is. But I know in the VO2, I don't even remember what my score was. Maybe it was like 64 or something like that in the times that I've done it. But in the times that I have, at least more recently, when I did a strength study a couple of years ago, and that was part of it, both times I pulled. Like I was like, I'm done. Like and I tapped out or whatever. And both times they were looking at my score and it was still totally climbing. Like I still had whatever left to go that was a good bit higher, but my mind, my central governor, whatever it is, it pulls the cord. It kind of ejects before I can even get there. And I don't know whether that's, yeah.
I 100% see that in coaching all the time. Ultra runners. You
Yep.
can tell just based on how they talk, whether they have that kind of what mindset they're in. Whether they're going to pull early, they're going to find an excuse to drop. They're going to find an excuse to like back off when it gets hard. You know, you can tell when you're just by the way they talk about their life or things in their life, or, you know, or there's just all these excuses and I'll get there. But when they say I'll get there, they're already making excuses when they haven't even tried.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay, but it's just, that's a mindset that they've built an automated proteins to that tree, and that tree is really strong. And the only way to overcome it is to actually the cool thing about this whole, and I think the hopeful part of this message I want people to get is that we have neuroplasticity, and you can unglue those tree-like structures with intentionality, meaning you're very intentional about doing something different to overcome that automated pathway you have. So if you're kind of one of those people that's always finding an excuse, you have to say, nope, go do it. Nope, go do it. And if you keep doing that long enough, you'll start you're sending proteins to a new tree-like structure, ungluing the old one and sending it to a new one. And then that new one eventually can overcome the old one. But I think what's interesting is that the studies, this is kind of interesting, kind of like a little bit of trivia on your neural pathways, is that if you have an automated pathway that is, say you're a reactionary person, right? That neural pathway, if that's how you do, when a stressful situation comes, you kind of freak out. That pathway you will pass. If you have offspring, you pass it through the sperm and the egg as an automated neural pathway for up to 3 to 4 generations. So it starts to put a lot more skin in the game for figuring out I have a negative behavior or I'm very not positive. It puts a little more skin in the game if you're thinking about having kids, that you want to kind of overcome that and work on it before you have kids.
Damn you, man. Where were you 13 years ago when I needed you?
I know. I didn't learn any of this before I had kids, dude. So I kind of just passed on my automated pathways and you know, and then you work on them. You got it, but everyone's gonna some of them are so automated that it's hard to overcome them. You have to keep working on them and keep working on them, and you have to apologize for when you do the stupid one. You know, when you react. I'm a reactionary person in my family, and that's how my dad was, and that's an automated pathway. I understand that now. That was passed on to me. I just recently, in the last few years, understood that why it's so automated, and without even thinking, I don't even have the thought to calm down, take a deep breath, chill out, now talk.
Hardwired,
and so I have to apologize a lot.
All right, I've just got a few more here. This next one is another 2-part sequence. I'm gonna skip over one. I was gonna go one. I had a photo of you with the activism piece. There was one during the Bears Ears preservation campaign and lobbying, but I'm just gonna skip that. You kind of already mentioned that. So the let's go with this. So on the concept of, and this is going back to kind of basketball, Jeff, not knowing the amazing places that man, where the roads that you would choose and the opportunities that you'd have, like where they take you, right? I mean, this shot, like in this, and the concept is here. So I've got this one and another photo from you in down in Chile, and just speaking
this is New Zealand.
Oh no, I had another one in this 2-part.
Got it.
Yeah. So, there was that photo, and then the other one was going to be this one from Ultra Fjord. And so, I guess for just a minute on this piece, just in the moment, right? I mean, thinking back, it's taken you to so many amazing and beautiful places. And there are some right off the top of your head that you're like, these were some of my top experiences in the moment, or this was this place where I just sat and I was just like struck by like, man, like I'm lucky, or this is an incredible location and an incredible moment.
Yeah. I mean, man, ultra running. If you would have told a farm boy in Missouri in a town of 4,700 people that I would be going to New Zealand and Europe and France and Switzerland and Japan and Chile, I would have said, yeah, right. It's just been such a cool ride. And I just embrace it, man. I just have one day at a time, and doors have opened, and it's been really cool to experience all that stuff. And the haka was one of the coolest experiences probably I've ever experienced. That the New Zealand thing, it just, they perform it for you, and then they do this. They have this traditional thing where they put the head warrior puts you go. I had to take off my hat, and we went head to head, and then you inhale each other. Like you both put your heads together, noses together, and you inhale. So the guy on my left, or on my right, so on the left of me in the picture, we put our heads together and we inhaled at the same time. And that's it like represent, I can't remember exactly what it represents, but it's like a warrior thing. Like you're like basically each other's aura, or whatever. I know I'm doing a really bad job of explaining, and it's probably not correct.
No, you're fine. I actually,
but it was like such
photo.
a cool experience to understand that culture and be a part of it, and them to embrace you as part of it. The guy on my right, when he saw that I stuck out my tongue, he was so stoked. Like he was I think he was the oldest one in the group. And he just right afterwards was like slamming me on the quad. I just ran 100 miles, but he was just like, yeah, and it was such a cool experience for, that to happen. And also my sister, my wife's sister, was in the Peace Corps, and she married a guy from Tonga, and they do the haka too. If anybody knows, some of the sports, they do it at the beginning of like a rugby match to intimidate. And so all my nephews, she has 3 boys, and they all know the haka stuff from watching rugby, Tongan rugby and New Zealand rugby, right? And so when they for them to see me get to do that was really cool. It was awesome. So cool.
Any others that are just off the top of your head that,
I think I had my experience in Japan was really cool. That culture is so humble and kind and thoughtful about everyone around them. You can't, unless you've been there, you can't really fathom, for example, like a little thing, like going to, in Tokyo, whatever the equivalent of their Union Station is, right? It's the busiest train station in the world. It is spotless. There's no graffiti. There's no trash. Like if I drop trash, someone else would pick it up, and it wouldn't be a janitor. Someone would just pick it up to get rid of it off the ground. Like, because it looks, because it's dirty. Like it's just so, and everyone's just so like, okay, another one that really jumped out at me. When you go on an escalator, everyone automatically goes to the left. So if someone's in a hurry, they can go up the right side. Think about that in every airport you've ever been in. There's always someone right in front of you. When you're in a hurry, they're taking up the whole space, right? And you're like, I really need to, man, I'm late for my flight, but they are already thinking about someone else. Someone else might be late, so I need to get to the left in case they're in a hurry. Right? It's just automated. And I just like those kind of things it's just really like, it's cool. It's humbling. It makes you realize that, sometimes Americans are kind of selfish.
Sometimes.
Yeah. We're so self-centered and it's sad, but, I don't know. There's just so many cool experiences that ultra running's brought me to. And I think it's definitely been cool.
And at one point in your career, I know that Bighorn was top of your list. I mean, it was someone I feel like you found your sweet spot in your first Bighorn win. Like it came together there, and I'm sure that fused with your perception of the event, as well as going back and a couple times. But that was early on, and you've had so many experiences like New Zealand under your belt now. Any top events on your list? I mean,
Bighorn always has I always have a soft spot for Bighorn. It was my first win, first 100-mile win too. And then I came back the next year and won again and got the course record, and then came back in 2008 and won. So that was like 2005, 06, 2008, and then came back in 2010 and got third with the flu. That was a sucky race. But I just really, I loved that community, and I really cut my teeth in hundreds in that race. That's where I learned to race 100. And that set me up for, all the stuff over the years of racing other ones, and learned how to push and when to push, and experimenting with pushing later in a race, and how much I could push, all those kind of things were kind of, Bighorn's always going to be a special race for me. And then, obviously Hard Rock is like one of my top races ever. I mean, I keep going back to that race. I'm a 5-time finisher. I'm coming back this year for my 6th time there. I just love the community in Silverton, and what gets created there. And I think anyone who criticizes the 3-bucket system of, I know everyone's frustrated that they can't get in, and there's some veterans like me that get in quite a bit. But the 3-bucket system really creates a super cool vibe there of like this really like old school, like we were talking about earlier, right? It's just that there's no other race like it. And anyone who doesn't get in, like I've had so many people come up to me that said, and I've told people to go like, and just go hang out for the week, and go watch the race, run on the course, check it out, get out in the mountains. There's beautiful trails, and just hang out. It becomes an ultra running village the week of the race. And it's such a small little town. It's such a cool space. And I think I've had so many people come up to me and go, I didn't really get it until I came. And then they're like, I understand why there's a 3-bucket system. And they're like, I'm willing to wait to get in. Like, people have been trying to get in the lottery for 5, 6, 7 years, and they understand. I mean, yes, of course it's frustrating, but there's something really special about a race like that has tried to keep that tradition. So, and unless you've been there and hung out and helped and volunteered and hung out and raced on the course and hung out the week of the race, I'd say be careful to criticize what you don't understand.
Yeah, I think there's a similar with other races, for sure. I think Western's in that mix, right? I mean, as much hype as there is around Western, and but you're there, and there's just that energy at Western. And
yeah, it's its own special thing. There's no other races like it. Like Western's another one I would put in that category. That it is like the Super Bowl of U.S. ultra running, right? It's such a big race. It's such a fun race. Like throwing down for the top 10. Just that there's the top 10, that's how you can get back in and stay in. It puts so much on that race that it just keeps you like it, as far as the elite race goes, it just keeps you in it. Like you don't let up, and you're like, I'm in 25th at mile 25, but man, sometimes I'm in 3rd, at the end, because it's just like such a crazy race.
Total. Right. The carnage and the unexpected things. And
so many fast people. I mean, there's 40 people in the elite men's field and the 40 women that could win it. That could legitimately, by their resume, should be able to win this race. And it's like taking, a bunch of bouncy balls and just throwing them up in the air, and, and them all bouncing all over the place. And one of them, somebody catches, whatever, I don't know.
You could just skip the race. How about just at the start, right there at Palisades or whatever? You just have all the elites just get a bouncy ball, and you just
it's crazy.
Whichever we can just skip the 100.
Yeah, it's insane. I love that race too. Another one's great.
All right, so I got one. Yeah, go ahead.
I got one more question. I just need to get my I need to plug in my laptop. I just got a 5% warning.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, there's my cover that's sitting on the right side of my desk. There's a power plug right there.
So and I have just here another 2-photo sequence, and that would be a segue we were just talking about, and then a final one that'll take us out. So and if we lose you, we lose you.
No, you won't lose me. I'll plug in here.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay. All right. So let's go. I think I got them both open. So the first one, as we were just talking about, well, actually, I'll do it in reverse here to a certain extent. One, as we've talked about throughout in various forms, is this. I mean, right? How many times you've been on this list? So for those who are just listening, this is a photo of the card for Ultra Runner of the Year. Jeff Browning, age 50, coming in at number 10 from I think announced in like January from 2021. But just like the 50 number there, right? And just the fact that you're still here at age 50, cranking the way you are at not these insignificant races and not these insignificant efforts, putting together all these pieces of the mental training, the physical training, the experience, the enjoyment, the support of your community, the support of your family, so many things to keep you in that spot, but still just amazing that you're still doing it at age 50 with these young ponies.
They're young enough to be my child.
Totally, like it's crazy.
I mean, legitimately, like my child. I mean, I have a 19-year-old right now in the house, so it's. I'm stoked to still be there and in that list. And for those who don't know, it's for North American Ultra Runner of the Year. There's always a lot of criticism of like, what about the Euros? And it's Ultra Running Magazine's North American Ultra Runner of the Year. So there's always a top 10 countdown to the number one person. And I have been on that list quite a few times, I think 6 times. And Ultra Runner of the Decade. I was 3rd on Ultra Runner of the Decade for 2010 to 2019. I'm always really humbled to be on that list. I love that we have that kind of recognition every year. That's just shows that, hey, we're going to recognize your hard work, not just one race, but the consistency of that year, right? Mm-hmm. Now, sometimes it might be on one giant performance, but a lot of times it's just on like, wow, you had, 3 wins or 5 wins or whatever in various kinds of races, and they recognize that. So I'm stoked to be at 50 on that list. Tropical John Medigator, he texted me and let me know that I was the first male to ever be 50 plus on that list. So I was pretty stoked at that little to be part of that because Megan Abergast, or Megan Canfield now, I think is her name. Sorry, Megan, I can't remember what your last name is. I know you as the older Megan Abergast because of my Oregon days.
I think you're right with Canfield. Yeah.
Canfield. She's been on the list, I think, a couple times in her 50s, amazing runner who's a little older than me. But kind of comes from the same generation. And, anyway, just, I think just being consistent and wanting to still train hard, still, do all the little things when you have to do when you're 50. You can't just run and eat anything you want anymore. You think about nutrition and mobility and strength and running. So,
and then so in the second part though was, and it could, I mean, it was a day of extremes. The effort was extreme. The amount of carnage in the field in this next photo was so there could be any number of reasons for it, but also, I mean, there's got to be chinks in the armor that comes at some point, because literally you're almost like not human in what you're able to keep perpetuating in just this moment, right? And that day, the race, the first one where you're like, dude, you're actually looking 50, like in that photo. You're looking,
I was, dude.
a little more aged, you're looking a little skinnier, and to know that your quads like blew on that day for the first time in your whatever history or whatever.
Yeah, and I had always heard of that phenomenon at Western States, and I was always like, well, I've never experienced that, but I'd always respected the first third of the race, and I didn't. I think a year off from racing hard was a factor. Excitement of being back racing at a big venue after 18-month hiatus, and with COVID and just. I got caught up, and in the race, I ran to the first, to give you some perspective. I went back and looked at all my splits, and you spoke of Yuhan earlier, and I read his 2-part I Run Far articles on the Western States killing machine on why you blow your quads at Western States. Because I was like, I get done and I'm like, I want to understand this. Why did this happen? And I went back and looked at my splits, and I ran 5 minutes faster at 3.8 miles at the top of escarpment. The first climb, I ran 5 minutes faster than I ever had.
Wow.
At the first aid station, I was 11 minutes faster at 11 miles. So a minute a mile faster in the high country in the first 11 miles than I'd ever been.
And was everybody doing it that day, or were you an outlier?
Yeah, we were running like crazy. Like, look at the men's race. It imploded. Mm-hmm. I mean, we fully, like, look at the top 10 times. Like, I think top 10 was like 18 something, like upper 18. Carnage. Normally 17:10 is 10th. And sometimes even close to sub 17 is 10th. I mean, it was a hot year, and it was hot in high country early. And so there was carnage. But normally I would have said, okay, it's a hot day. Boom, lay back. I lost my brain. I mean, admittedly, I lost my brain. I ran too hard the first third of the race, and it sets you up for that 4,000 feet of downhill to El Dorado Canyon in 13 miles, right? Once you leave Robinson Flat. So that picture you showed was at Robinson Flat. I was already feeling it. And I was like, oh. And so the guy who was patting me on the back is an old bro. He's crewed me for so many times. He knows what I'm like. And he could tell. He was like, what's wrong with Bronco? Like, he's not his normal self here. Normally I'm like totally chill. And I was not. I was already worked. I mean, I think, I've only had 2 DNFs in 22 years. And one of them was a rolled ankle in 2015, my first one at Mont Blanc. So at UTMB. And that was like limped on it, tore my air and dropped, and it was horrible, and it was an injury, right? So it's like that one you can see, like that was always my excuse. It's either got to be life-threatening or an injury, or I'm not dropping, even if I got to death march it in. But in that race, that was my first true DNF, where I was just like, I am done. I am like on pogo sticks. Like I felt like someone had like tenderized my quads so bad. They hurt so bad. I was worried about rhabdo, like pushing myself into rhabdo by running on like tender quads like that. Because I'd heard, Jesse Haynes had done that one year at Western States by continuing to push on super sore quads. And so I called it at Forest Hill, and it was a bummer, but it was a nice piece of humble pie that reminded me why I race the way I race, and why you don't win it in the first third of the race. Especially when I saw the times, I was like, I should have been licking my chops, and just picking people off on the way down to the river, being like, hang in there, bro, hang in there. While you pass them like they're sitting still, like every other year. But I just ran a stupid race, and that's what happens.
Well, well, it's unfortunate. I would have hoped you would have had an incredible year, but at the same time, I'm
glad it happened.
Right. At age 50, that you still had a stupid race. That's good.
Yeah, I was stupid.
All right, last one too, and then we'll close out. Let's go, because it's such a huge part of what we do. I mean, I guess there's some individuals where maybe it wouldn't necessarily apply, but for us, it has. And to allow you to do what you've done in this space, and a huge thanks, huge props, and often don't get the recognition that it deserves on this angle. Would be there, right? So your last day, I think, in Bend, leaving the house, but the larger scope though of the family that's been with and behind, that you've in some ways set the bar for, that's always been a huge part of your life. And then I know that from being out there, at least for myself, when I'm out there and in longer races, and particularly when the miles get ugly and you don't necessarily want to be there, I don't know, I often go back to family and I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, I should just be home, like spending time with my family. I know they're a huge thing for you, and you and Jenny have been, I think, amazing parents, and so intentional about the way that you're raising your kids, but such a huge part of your equation.
Yeah, I have to give a shout out to my wife, who's right over there. She's just, she's supported me through this whole thing. And there's been times when it was pretty tough, way back in the days when it wasn't a professional sport, and I was spending so many hours when I could have been making money, providing for the family more. I mean, I had a good design business in Bend, but Bend was expensive, and I wasn't putting a lot of money in savings during that time. And she was pretty understanding most of the time in those early days. I still remember the first time I got a paycheck from running, and she used to remind me that it's a hobby. And I remember I go, it's not a hobby. Hold up the check. It wasn't very much, but I was like, it's not a hobby anymore. But it's really been really cool, because it's definitely like transitioned into a full-time career in coaching. I don't really do much design work at all anymore. I just full-time coaching and running. And I just really enjoy sharing all that years and years of tinkering and being my own guinea pig with my own athletes I coach, and all the tinkering I've done with nutrition over the years, and race nutrition and lifestyle nutrition and all those things. They've just been really behind me. And I know I've been a pain sometimes, because, it takes a very kind of type A addictive personality to keep pushing and keep doing what I'm trying to do. It takes a lot of hours, and there's times when the family has to sacrifice for me to go, yeah, I'm going to be out of town this weekend doing lab testing in Scottsdale. I'm going to be out of town this weekend with a video shoot, like I'm going to be out of town this weekend for this, and I got to race this weekend. And then, I got to go run in the canyon for a whole day, when there's just been a lot of times when they've been very understanding and dealt with my insanity, and I really appreciate it that they do. And I they definitely are on my mind, especially when that was the hardest thing about Western States dropping out, because I've always had this kind of like ideology in my own head that what does it show my kids if when it just gets hard, I drop? That's why I've never dropped in all these years. I've hardly, only 2 times, because when it got hard, I would that's even running Bighorn in 2010 with the flu. I was puking and like stupid. I can't believe I did that, but I did it because I didn't want to quit, because I wanted to show my family that, like, I'm sorry I took all this time away from you, but I want to show you that I'm going to like see this through. no matter how much of a death march it becomes. So I just really appreciate them and love them. And I have to acknowledge that for sure, because I couldn't have done this without them. I just, otherwise I'd be like this sad single dude.
Yeah, you might look. Yeah. Yep. Well, yes. Well, I am thankful for them as well. You've inspired so many people. You've set bars, you've raised bars, you for sure have shaped the space. And so the community at large is indebted to them as well. So to your family, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything that we didn't touch on here that would be fun to mention before?
Well, the only thing that kind of jumps out, and I was looking at some of the comments, the nuances of diet. I agree with that comment. There are a lot of nuances with diet, and everyone needs to learn to like not put themselves into a specific category and be willing to experiment a little bit and try things. But also understand if you're not thriving to like, switch. And I would say this from a coaching perspective. I do not coach my women athlete the same way I coach my men. So from a nutritional standpoint, there's a lot of nuance with women and regulating hormones and all that. And even with when you give them speed work, it's not the same as a guy. So I'd like to acknowledge that, there is a nuance there, and make sure that's clear.
Mm-hmm. Right on. Thanks for sifting through those. And some of the conversations, and for those of you who left comments, and I think that was maybe one from Kawana earlier, I didn't want to always break the, if you guys were flowing, I didn't want to break the conversation, but thank you for going back to that. Anything else that would have been fun to cover that you want to put out there?
I don't know, man. We went 3 hours.
I know, dude. I so appreciate you being willing to go long,
Oh, dude, it's good to see you, man.
Totally. Yeah. I wish whatever. I guess I don't say that, right? I've had so many wonderful experiences. I appreciate the journey in this direction. I appreciate my family here. But if it would have been fun to continue on a journey back there where maybe our paths would have crossed more regularly. And that would have been a lot of fun.
Yeah. But then we wouldn't have had this cool walk down memory lane.
For sure. So hopefully when I turn 50 and you're 55 and maybe you actually finish 11th on the ultra running list and you're not quite as hot, we'll get
the dreaded 11th.
We'll go for a run. And I don't know, maybe, because I think I can still do it. Maybe we'll see if we can take you under a 5-minute mile.
Oh man, I kind of want to still. I don't know if I could, because that was like 5 years ago when I got the 501, but I actually right after that was thinking, man, I should just train for it and try to throw down one. But I race too many ultras is the problem.
You do, right? Sub 5-minute. Well, for you, sub 5-minute mile and hard rock. Not necessarily right, and so risky, right? For our age and running fast, and for
I just watch it all the time with older runners who are still trying to run faster, shorter races. Mm-hmm. They tend to have a lot of niggles.
Yeah,
constantly pop up if they're still trying to do that kind of work. That's why I like to stay in that steady state tempo range a lot if I'm doing any quality, because it's pretty safe.
Yeah. Well, again, I am so grateful for you taking as much time as you did here, Jeff. I'm thankful to those of you out there who have tuned in live to this, and for all those who will potentially watch it in the future. I'm grateful for those of you who supported the Trails Collective, will support it going forward, will allow us to turn it around and support other athletes. I am grateful. For Jeff, you can find him at gobroncobilly.com. He, as he mentioned, is a amazing coach, I would imagine. And so you can find his coaching services there and keep tabs on him. So
thanks, Ian.
Yeah, totally. I really enjoyed catching up with you, Jeff. I really appreciate the time and valued it.
Cool.
All right, man. I will check you
Giddy up.
next time. Giddy up.